Okay, everybody's here. That's good. First
How's
off,
everyone doing?
yeah, I was
Doing fine, Scott. How are you?
I'm good, I'm good.
I was gonna ask that, but you know, it's alright. But yeah, so thank you all for coming on. You know, TEC, Smin, Napalm, Gruber. I was in a rush to get some War Thunder stuff in because originally I was supposed to get Bad Panzer on, but I think he fell asleep on me, so I had to.
Naps.
And I heard, you know, stuff happens. I can make do as long as I don't come off as some weird suspicious person. Right.
Okay. When do we start?
Oh, well, we can start right now. I was just gonna run through, you know, the length and everything,
Yeah.
but I'm already 10 minutes late with it, so I'll jump straight into it. You know, I don't want to take up too much of your time.
If you could give me like 2 more minutes, I'd be back right now because I need to get myself something to drink.
That's alright. That gives me time to do introductions and other bits and pieces like that, and I can go through that.
Yeah, and don't forget to send me the link, please.
There you go. Right, so first off, thanks for coming. I'm Collusion. I am a War Thunder Game Master, and I am now doing the weekly quote-unquote Thundercast podcast thing where I invite people in, like yourselves, to partake in a discussion, just a friendly discussion, lighthearted. You know, it could be about War Thunder, it could be about cake, it could be about your job, it could be about cars, it could be about anything. It doesn't have to relate to War Thunder, you know, but it comes back to people that, you know, it's a part of the War Thunder community that's people in.
When cake's on your list, you should invite Tom.
I was tempted to invite Tomek, but I'm gonna save him for like a really special event.
For when you have cake.
Yeah, when I actually have cake.
Celebration, that'd be great for Tom.
Yeah. So I do, you know, Game Master things around War Thunder. I do moderation stuff around Twitch for people like Fly and this, you know, other channels out there. Too many to list. You'd get sick of me talking about them after a while. You know, I am a jobless pleb looking for a job, but you know, sometimes that happens. 20 years old. It's really nothing about me. Live in New Zealand. And yeah, so if we move into guest intros, I know Napalm said he'd be back, but I'm gonna try and, you know, hopefully intros will be long enough till we get. Oh, he's back. Never mind.
Yeah, I'm back.
So if we're just gonna go from the top of the voice channel downwards in terms of, you know, introducing you guys. So if you'd like to introduce yourself, Gruber, that'd be great.
I'm Gruber. I'm a senior technical moderator. I've been around for a few years now. Jeez, I just thought about the number. It's bigger than I would. Yeah, I've been around for a little while. I am in IT at a library, which is a curse, to be honest, because librarians and IT people, they don't mix. Other than that, I'm ask away. I play, well, I guess I'll go into what I play. I played it all, of course. I've been around since playing the game since 2012. So a long time there too. I play everything in RB now, except for planes. I still go grind my Silver Lions in level 3 British planes because I can do that. It makes money. And that's about it.
There we go. Napalm, you're up next.
Okay. So hello there. My name is Napalmratte. I'm a German YouTuber that produces videos in English, and I'm trying to best to make my to make myself understandable. Doesn't work all the time, but I try my best nevertheless. I play War Thunder since March 2013, and there is a never-ending journey to have everything in the game. And yeah, that's basically it about me for War Thunder terms. In real life, I come from Bavaria, where exactly I keep it as a secret. And in real life, I'm a student, and I'm in the final year of you know, studying.
Nice. Moving on down, we've got Smin.
Hi guys, yep, I'm Smin. I'm a community manager for War Thunder. I'm one of the part-time guys, so I'm only here mainly in the evenings. I've actually got another job as an engineer during the day. I've been here since, I've been playing since February of 2013 and joined the team later that year as a bug reporter and suggestion helper, then as a senior tech, and now as a community manager for the technical side of things. So all bug reports, suggestions, and feedback is sort of my area where I like to enjoy discussing with you guys on the forum, on social media, going through suggestion topics, feedback topics, looking at social interactions and things like that, seeing what we can do to get your ideas, your vehicles, your maps, your game modes, and obviously the important stuff like bug reports, historical issues, things like that. That's really where I like to dive into. So playing the game, love to play air. That's always been my main thing. But I do enjoy ground forces. Yes, Spitfires, as Rick will tell you. Spitfires are my absolute favourite because there's definitely a British bias there. But no, I'm really enjoying helicopters, really enjoying naval, but a bit of a generalist. And yeah, mainly realistic battles.
Awesome. So you're,
He's also my boss. I have his old.
Yes, yes.
I think when I first joined War Thunder, I don't know if it was back then, but this was around late 2014, early 2015. I think I remember seeing you around the technical mod section, Smin.
Yep. I started off with suggestions, the suggestion helpers, then it was bug reports, and we changed them all together to be technical moderators now. So just to make it easier.
It was from Salber's experience, one of the suggestion mods. He's quite happy with that change.
Yeah.
Is he finally what tech mod with us?
Soon, TM.
Soon, yes. Love it.
And finally, last but not least, we have the European Canadian.
Hey, so I'm the European Canadian. I run the YouTube channel, the European Canadian, and I also help run the Tech Hub, which is probably the most active, at least, War Thunder community when it comes to Discord. And yeah, that's basically what I do. In my normal life, I'm a scientific researcher, and I graduated university ages ago. It feels like now. I feel kind of old, so I'm just kind of just going along and doing my thing.
Totally understandable. The only difference is, like, I didn't go to university. I just dropped straight out of school. Well, I didn't drop out of school. You know, I got interview skills and all these fancy certificates, and I'm just waiting to apply that knowledge to an actual job experience. But yeah. Anyway, thanks for introducing yourself, guys. So, you guys kind of have the gist of who these guys are now, what they do, you know, how they fit into everything. So, I think we should start with a very, very random question, and you guys can choose, like, who wants to answer first or anything. I don't mind. If you had a if I had a magic wand and I could get one superpower from it or from each of you, what superpower would you give me?
Do I actually have to have this power myself, or is it just something
you don't
I
have
can
to?
grant
It can be something.
Oh.
It's completely like infinite. You can just choose anything.
So you're taking a superpower off me?
No,
right?
I'm not taking it off you. It's more or less you're giving it to me while keeping it.
Well, it ain't gonna be
It
anything
makes a
powerful,
big
I'll tell you that.
It makes a whole big difference, though. If you're taking it from me, you're getting one of my crappy ones. The power to fart on command.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
Well, I could give you the superpower of looking occasionally at the minimap because reasons.
I swear I look at the minimap, okay?
Yeah, to remind yourself to do that, because everybody knows there is a minimap. Everybody knows that you should, from time to time, look at it, but not everybody does it all the time.
Yeah.
And I think that's a pretty powerful thing to do once in a while, regardless if you are in a plane, tank, or a ship, or a helicopter.
The Federation of Venturesouls says superpower of the Free Golden Eagles.
There's a website that has it will show you the minimap on your second monitor live.
Oh,
I'd have to look that up while you guys are talking.
that would be quite magical. There's a podcast channel just above this voice channel. I still need to add you to Smin because I was rushing people around and I ended up with extras, so I was like, okay, this'll do. I'll just grab everybody.
Oh, okay, no problem. That's cool.
But it's up there, so if you need to post a link or, you know, post something there,
Great.
it's there so we can look at it. Nobody else can see it, just the people in the podcast. And, you know, yeah. But, yeah, so here's a superpower answer question. I was, honestly, I was expecting everybody just to go super quiet on me and just, you know, because the first time I did the first stream, I had Fly-In and Miles, and I had CMD Nomad, and I had Elite, one of the forum mods. And, you know,
yeah.
I asked which one of them would like to go first, and then we had like a really nice 5-second completely silent pause. And, you know, it was one of those really awkward silence moments, but, you know, that kind of thing happens.
I guess as a superpower, the only thing I could really offer is I have an unnecessary amount of books on Spitfires I could give you, like more than you would ever need, more than anyone ever. That's
You
the only
give
real
the
thing I can offer.
superpower of Spitfire Ace.
I would give you the ability that you can turn anything you touch into glass, but the issue is you don't actually get to choose when you touch it if it's going to turn to glass or not.
So it's just, it could be completely random. If I touch it, it'll turn to glass.
Yes.
So what if I touch glass?
Now, this is the conundrum. Can we get double glass? Or
Does it become double glazed glass?
double
Or...
glaze? Yeah.
That is... Don't worry, friend, you're not late. We're just discussing what happens if you had the ability to randomly turn things into glass at random, but if you touch glass. You know, welcome to...
Well, you probably get an IS6 optic.
I'm pretty sure the IS6 optic's like a 6-way glazed glass. That thing's almost bulletproof.
I always like the idea of superpowers that you can't control. So if somebody sneezes, they teleport. Or if somebody falls asleep somewhere, they wake up on the other side of the world. Like, I love little things like that. I'd love, if we did have superpowers in real life, to make them not, like, overpowered and crazy. I think that's how you deal with it. You know, you give them a weird-ass side effect on top of everything.
Yeah, I used to be really into the whole concept is if you sneeze, then you would change personality. Or like your hair color would change or something. I always thought that was hilarious and funny. But you know, that would be something there. Viking in the chat says, I will give you the superpower of teleporting, but with the real effects, so you will miss the world with about 30 kilometers and end up somewhere in space, so you can't really use it. That's a bit
I wouldn't go ahead.
Convenient.
I wouldn't worry about going into space. I'd worry about going underground. Because at least in space you can see some cool...
Yeah, that's true. Anyway, we'll continue on now. With, thanks for asking that super random question, you know, that just kind of warms everybody up, you know. Something there. So, in terms of the War Thunder community, so... what are you guys known for in the community? Like, you know, we know you're content creators, or we know you're what stuff. Like, what do people actually know for you? Like, do they know you for crashing into a bridge? Do they know you for crashing, or not crashing in a carrier, landing on a carrier? Do they know you for, you know, whatever reason? Like, for example, people know me in the community. I do mod stuff for Fly. I'm a bit of a Kiwi dick in some cases. I don't do it in game. I do it in voice when I'm talking to friends. We'll be smartasses in here. And, you know, it's the kind of stuff I get known for, but everybody generally has fun. What are you guys known for?
Well, I simply begin here. I think I want people to know me for my tank reviews, maybe for my first impressions of vehicles, but I think they mostly know me for the touch of extra spicy ranting, or, you know, having sometimes a bit of a pessimistic sounding approach towards things. So that is what I think the community thinks about me.
I think the majority of the community just thinks I'm a monotonous, boring asshole. So I think I'll just stick.
I mean, you know, you never know. The community might think of you as a really nice, outgoing content creator that's nice because, I don't know, he replies to a lot of comments, or he has a lot of interaction with his fans, or something like that. I think it'd be amazing how many people would actually say that instead of, being like, oh, this guy's an asshole or whatever. Like, I find that.
Oh no, I know.
Because during the time I've done mod stuff for Fly, like, I constantly see stuff like that, whether it be, people calling him a dick, or people saying he's really nice because he replies, or whatever. Kind of see that. Anyway, sorry to interrupt the whole what are you known for thing.
Alright, to get the map open in the browser, when you're in a match, go to options, and then in the bottom left corner in blue, it'll say open map, and it'll keep it in a browser. You can put it on your second. And it actually has a lot more information than your normal mini map. You're going to love it.
Okay.
You can also just put a shortcut in your browser for a link to localhost port 111. I think it's 41s or 51.
Quite fancy. I did not know about that till now. Damn.
But when it comes to my content, I think I'm known for discussing the news and, I don't know, trying to just keep people updated on what's going on. The majority of people that I talk to that watch my content have very busy lives like I do. So for them, it's like a way to keep up with the game without having to, basically research everything. Like they can listen to the video on the go or something like that. And so that, basically covering the news and what's going on, I think is how I would put it.
Absolutely. What about you, or what about you guys, Gruber and Smin? What are you guys known for in the War Thunder community, aside from being, a senior tape modder or community manager?
I'm not really known for much, to be honest. I only had a couple hundred forum posts before I became a tech mod. I didn't talk much in the community or browse around much in the forums, or I still really don't. I just keep my nose to the grindstone. Up until I started playing realistic battles, because I got tired of being seen in a tank, I played so much arcade. If I was known for anything, it was being in so many battles that it proved that I don't have a life. I mean, they took that little marker away in the forums that used to show you how many battles you had been in, the little cross swords thing.
Did they?
But before it went away, it was over 28,000. They took mine away because of whatever for staff. They think it's... People pick on people who hadn't played enough, elitists. I'm like, man, I tried to tell them that's my only good thing, because my number was above 28,000 before the last time I saw it. I think it's above 40 now.
I'll be amazed if mine was above like 10,000. But I still know my way around the game. I don't like to like brag about I'm this good or blah blah blah. I'm just a...
Oh, I suck. I just have a lot of time on my hands and have played a lot. Like, I am horrible at this game.
I suck at naval, I suck at helicopters, and I'm all right tanker, and I'm a right pilot. I'll say that much anyway.
I think that's one of the best things about the game, though. There's an outlet for everyone. If it, it could be skin creation, it could be content creation, it could be flying helicopters or tanks, or some people play everything. There's a niche for everyone in the War Thunder community, which is the best part about it, in my opinion.
Yeah. On the note of sorry to interject. On the note of things, those things, I do have a War Thunder squad running, so if you do want to hop on and squad up for some naval action, that's an option there. So.
Sure,
I'll get in there.
I mean, I know there's 5 of us in here, so one or 2 of us can sit out, or if you're not good at talking and playing, it's under.
I'll take a rain check. I want to concentrate on what I'm saying.
Yeah,
if your customers don't mind me cussing, then we'll be fine playing and talking at the same time. I cuss myself, the game, and everybody around me when I play, just so you know.
I'm going to link you the Aussie stream that I did, the last Thundercast discussion I had last time. That was really good, that one.
Okay. Yeah, I pass out as well on the squad, because I played the entire day with my ships, so I'm kind of happy to take a little bit of break from gaming.
Understandable, man. Understandable. I do not have the drive to play all day. That would just drive me insane.
Yeah, I just finished my work day, so I'm just getting revved up. The beer's starting to get good to me, and it's time for a bio break. I'll be right. I'm gonna have to get one of those in a second.
Well, yeah. Let's move on to the topic of discussion, shall we? So, I explained to Napalm and TC that the topic of discussion for today's Thunder stream is naval battles. And, we'll start with something simple. So, when naval battles first came out, when they announced that it was going to be PT boats, Coast Guard boats and whatnot, what did you guys initially think about said PT boats and Coast Guard boats, and, the surprise that, oh, it's not destroyers or submarines or battleships or carriers, it's PT boats and Coast Guard boats and whatnot?
I was,
okay.
Go ahead.
You go ahead.
I was personally happy with it. The reason for this is because when I started War Thunder, the idea going forward was combined forces, combined arms, and because of this, the only way I can see planes and tanks getting along, especially tanks getting along with naval forces, is if they're PT. Or if they're smaller ships. Now, the more we get towards, larger ships such as destroyers, like cruisers, maybe heavy cruisers in the future, that dream goes away, and that is one of the big reasons why I started War Thunder. That's why I'm looking forward to World War mode and trying to combine everything together. To me, that sounds fun, and when they announced it, that is what I saw. I still thought there was going to be issues between balance of boats and planes. But I could see an avenue where it all fit together on one map, and nowadays, unfortunately, I don't see that.
I mean, I kind of see where you're coming from with that.
Well, a destroyer can't, you can't put a tank against a destroyer.
Yeah, I mean,
it's just
when it comes to accuracy, I would say the tank's gonna hit the destroyer easier, but if the destroyer hits the tank, it's gonna be, oh well, that's gonna hurt.
Well, a destroyer can hit you from 5 kilometers away. A tank can't.
That's a good point. I mean, give the tank crew the time of day and they'll try.
Well, it depends. If you have an ATGM tank, then.
Oh.
But yeah, when I actually played the ships for the first time, I was really excited. It was new, fresh, and exciting. And the ships played differently back then because, especially, just to put it in a nutshell, if you played the American PT boats, they were amazing. They had 50 cals, 20 millimeters, 37 and 40 millimeters, and you could fire everything simultaneously at line of sight, with an SPA in tanks. And then it actually developed into something that I personally didn't appreciate that much. So range finding with PT boats, at point blank range when the guns just point to the sky, and then getting just harvested by destroyers. That was not a step into the right direction from the PT boat perspective. I really love my PT boats, and I think they have a place in War Thunder. I also think destroyers and light cruisers and later on maybe heavy cruisers have a place in the game, but maybe not in the current setup. A lot of things have to be balanced and tweaked and adjusted to make them work, to make it fun and enjoyable for every sort of section. And yeah, this is where I think a big portion of the design force of Gaijin should go, especially on maps. And I think there is so much variety with the PT boats, with the armament, the speed, the armor, the firepower. We not only have guns and machine guns and torpedoes, but also depth charges and rockets, many more things, and in the future also mines. So there is a huge potential for rearranging the building blocks within War Thunder in such a manner that you just have a awesome, exciting gameplay. And this is now the chance that Gaijin has to take, and which they can take. That's my opinion on the current situation.
I agree. Are we taking turns? I'm sorry, I came back from my bio.
That's alright. We're just kind of discussing, our thoughts and opinions on how Naval Forces first was. And, if you were to go into how it's kind of evolved into what it is now.
No, I agree with everything Napalm said. It got so bad I stopped playing it in the testing It was horrible. And I like it now. It's much, much better. It's playable and fun. But I agree it's going to have to evolve. And I have faith that it's going to evolve because, and here's my crazy logic, the control set that we have right now is well thought through, well planned. I've been able to map it out on my keyboard and the controls with my mouse, and I play with a Logitech a gamepad. And let's see, what is this? A Naga Hex has a bunch of thumb buttons on it, so I'm able to map all my stuff out and play it. However, you're right. I've always said they would have at least light cruisers. I think they might go to heavy cruisers, but that's getting into battleship-sized guns, and that's 15 miles. So I don't know. I know it's going to change a little, but I like where they're going with it.
Yeah.
The pre-existing issues that War Thunder ships have are not solved by larger ships. If anything, they're exemplified. So even though the game mode itself has improved a lot over the last year or so, especially through the CVT, the problem with adding larger ships is that it doesn't help any situation in fixing the game. If I was them personally, I would focus much more on adding new mechanics to make every boat relevant at most levels. So that's why I like this idea of mines. That's why I really like the idea of torpedoes. Torpedoes are the great equalizer when it comes to, naval forces. It's something we don't have across the spectrum in tanks or in planes. So I would much prefer if they just focused on interesting, cool little mechanics instead of just adding bigger stuff.
I'd agree with that. I'd have to say, in my personal opinion, when we did first announce Naval, I was quite excited by the prospect of, I guess, a fresh approach to what many games have taken nowadays. The battleships and the cruisers and the aircraft carriers are sort of the glorified examples, I guess, what history remembers the most. But there is a story to every kind of vessel, every type of vessel. They all played a role in war. And War Thunder's always had quite a varied platform of vehicles across the board. In any class, be that aircraft or ground forces, we have unique machines that haven't really been replicated or given much spotlight in many other forms of media. And the naval aspect of smaller ships combining with larger ships is, as people have already said, a complicated one, because like you say, there are balances that have to be struck across the board. You can't have one class that just dominates another one. And obviously a lot of the CBT was nailing down the core aspects of the game mode, such as physics and just general modeling, damage modeling, flooding mechanics, things like that. And a lot of that, as has already been said, is working quite well now. That was the most important thing. And now is sort of the time to work on game modes, explore certain other things, like how can ships interact with each other. And as the European Canadians already said, mines and things like that are newer developments now that sort of give smaller vessels a chance against the larger vessels, and also just create more interesting tactical approaches other than just going in guns blazing or having to rely on aircraft support to bring down heavy ships. There's other tactical approaches you can use within a naval battle to combat the various classes you'll experience, and that'll only develop more as time goes on, obviously with other things like World War mode, as people have already mentioned again. There is still the prospect of certain classes facing other ground forces, for example. Obviously the larger ones would have a big advantage in the current format if they were just on an open map where they could shoot for kilometers against tanks that couldn't obviously fire back. But there'll be opportunities for the lower ranks to fight and certain events, and World War mode is an excellent staging ground because obviously a lot of the rules can be different in that mode compared to just standard realistic battles or standard arcade battles. So the future's definitely bright, I think, and there's a lot of different avenues that can be explored. This really is just the beginning now. Obviously, we've gone into open test. There'll be a lot more people playing. There's a lot more ideas and voices to be heard for what we can do and what we can change now.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to sticking around and seeing where it goes. Especially, even if it does go up into the bigger ships, or if they sit here and improve on the smaller ships.
But I think we're at a comfortable size right now. The cruisers, obviously there was a lot of outcry close to the start of Naval. People did want the larger ships, and we took a very slow approach on this because it's important to remember that you can't just throw things like battleships into a game like War Thunder. War Thunder's always been about a realistic experience as far as possible, and a battleship is obviously, a lot of games speed them up, a lot of games throw them in environments where they're very artificially boosted. and that's often not considered when you consider a huge vessel like that in an environment like what we have. So we had a starting point, which was the smaller ships. We knew they worked, we knew they had grounding in the game, we knew they had a place in the game, and obviously we worked up from there. But it's important not to, I guess, just focus on what ships can we add that are larger, but also how can these ships interact with each other, how can these ships be used in a battle with each other, and making sure that everyone is having fun no matter what they're playing, and they don't feel like they're at a disadvantage because they're playing a smaller ship or a larger ship, for example.
Well, if that's the case, there is a real difference right now between, like, basically the brackets of 3-3 to 4-3, right? A lot of people bought the premium destroyer. A lot of people have either ground through to the destroyers, and now there is, let's call it an artificial layer. And this is because of, you know, people wanting to play the good stuff, playing the meta stuff. And if you're in that 3-3, 3-7, 4-0 bracket, and you come up against the 4-3 destroyers, there's really not a lot you can do. And the only thing you can do is hope for a torpedo while trying to hide somewhere, or, you know, basically staying near the point where there's a lot of cover, or you just get absolutely ram-railed by the destroyers. And this has always been my fundamental problem with adding larger and larger stuff, because it just becomes whoever has the largest ship, whoever has the largest guns, and we're seeing it now in War Thunder, even in this early stage. And I don't know what the counter is to that. You know, the only counter I can see is with the light cruiser, where it's too slow to really do a lot the majority of the time, or it takes a lot of the battle to get to a capture zone, or, you know, something like that. Is that how you do it, you know, through map design, or do you put a wall between these larger ships and these smaller ships, you know, around the 3-3, 3-7 area when they get up to it?
I think there's various different approaches you can take. I mean, like you said, you could put an artificial wall in there necessarily. I mean, if it got to the point where it was just, you know, there is no tactical approach to it, you could put a battle rating wall. But then I don't necessarily think that's good, in my opinion. Having different classes of ship or ground forces or even aircraft, whatever type of vehicle it may be, having them all in the same battle, as you've already said, is one of the core aspects of War Thunder. The whole game has been about combined arms, a unified approach to a certain thing, and not just having, you know, it would be like having an air battle with just fighters and no bombers, or just attackers, for example. So yep. I think, you know, one aspect is the battle rating, one aspect is also, as you said, is the map design, you know, what avenues can be explored there. But then you also don't want to make a map that is fundamentally just a maze for smaller ships, and, you know, just having outside borders for the destroyers to play with. You want to kind of have an approach where a destroyer could maybe take a risky approach into what could be a torpedo nest, but have a higher reward with that, possibly by a game mode choice. There could be a capture zone, or, you know, further game modes in the future may explore this as well. It depends on a various different, you know, how do you get players, what's the objective in the map, what is the map design, how can a smaller vessel get around a larger vessel, and what can they do. But obviously it's still early stages right now, and things will be explored. It's just about striking that balance.
Yeah, I think it can be done. One of the things that we saw with ground forces, I mean, even like when was like the MBT 70 and the KPZ 70 announced? It was what, August last year?
Yeah, around New Era time. Yeah.
Yeah, around then. And what we saw along with that was one of the larger maps which actually had a bunch of different playstyles, you know, Fulda. And Fulda still has a decent amount of playstyles behind it. And then we've got a lot of introductions of larger maps and different ways of dealing with them. And I'm hoping that, you know, that happens to ships. You know, we don't, not exactly, you know, just larger maps, but actual differences between the maps, which are, you know, affecting different vehicles.
Yeah, one word about, you know, big maps for tanks. I really like big maps, so you can flank, but you also can push through the middle. You can hide in open field with, you know, ridge lines and ditches and all those things. But very often the problem that I have with large maps, in particular with Fulda, it's a big map, and there are lots of opportunities, but then you only have an 8 versus 8 on this big map. And also the engagement range then itself is very often and very short. So what people then very often associate with a large map is just a large travel time, not like a diversity in playstyle. And I think the Maginot Line map actually kind of offers everything. You have long-range engagements, you have city brawl, you have medium range, you can have soft cover, you have hard cover. There is everything. And still, very often you get this map then for low-tier tanks. We kind of have the same problem the other way around with patrol boats at the moment. And very often, what really I think is very damaging for the gameplay, that when you are in a patrol boat, you spawn, you go for the cap, and let's just say you battled your way through to the cap. Then there are multiple maps where, when you are in the capture zone, so in the objective, you're actively already spawn camping the enemy spawn, and very often within the cap, there is very often no obstacle, nothing where you can hide behind. So this is directly into the gameplay. And so I actually don't remember the map. It's the harbor map, where there are a lot of shipwrecks around, and one shipwreck is partially going into a cap. And that's already offering a lot of diversity, and this is something that I like to see.
I think, personally, just when I think of a War Thunder map, I think of, a map that's not excessively large and, you're able to get somewhere just to get one shot in some cases. But I also don't like a really small and cramped map. There's gotta be that kind of in-between balance. And then, when it comes, different vehicles are different on different maps. Whether it be, cruisers on, say, a destroyer map, or PT both cruiser map. But, again.
Well, the great thing about ground forces is that you don't just have the horizontal plane, you've also got the vertical plane, right? And for ships, this is a lot less of as a thing going on, because you have to expose yourself in order to go after another ship, and you don't have as much control of your vessel compared to a tank. So those playstyles go out the window. The great thing about air, if we look at air realistic, is the fact that you are able to, the map is more about where the AI is, and that is basically normally dictates where the battles are generally going to be. Now, in ships, we have neither of those things. So there either has to be something added in to fix this, whether it is AI, whether it is a bit more verticality, or you have to come up with some other method to be able to balance these larger ships or these smaller ships. Because right now it doesn't exist, and to be honest, it's quite painful until you actually get to the destroyers, and then when you get to that second or third destroyer, you just start doing what everybody else is doing.
Yeah.
I think one thing I'd like to see, and this is a personal thing, like, this isn't speaking for the community, this is speaking for me. I'd like to see subs in the game, but not just submarines, like, things like the I-400 class, but then also stuff like the small little one-person manned submarines that had like 2 torpedoes. Because the way I see it is that would add verticality to naval battles. You've got your above the waves, you've got your sky being your planes, and then you've also got the underwater subs. And that also adds an incredible usage for setting like depth charge timers, or dragging mines or depth charges along the back of your boat, whatever boats did that. Things like that. It just adds that kind of, there's like a 3-step system there. You've got the sky, you've got the water's surface, and you've got what's below. And, everything kind of plays into that.
The problem with submarines is that they're a boom or bust scenario. So one thing we've seen with helicopters is helicopters, when they first were added into the game, didn't work. They were too expensive, and also people hadn't ground out the good helicopters. So, it kind of screwed up people's perspectives. Now people are running around with Mi-35Ms and H-1Zs, which are a hell of a lot cheaper in SB compared to what they were to start with. And, they're smash in face. Now, with submarines, they're really slow. They have to engage from absolutely miles away, and if you get close, let's say, how do you cap a point? Can you cap a point under the water? How are we going to do that?
I would imagine, this is The ideas I come up with are very basic. Like, you know, I had an idea back in the day for an advanced game mode for tanks, where instead of having capture points on the map, every single grid square on the map was something you could capture, and then the tickets drain depending on how many grid squares you've actually captured on the map. But, you know, of course, that was a really simple idea, and I hadn't thought about respawn zones, or how you're going to refill your ammo, or, you know, bits and pieces like that.
I guess just going back to the submarine capture there, you could just say, for example, if you're submerged, you capture the zone at a much significantly reduced rate, and obviously you're also highlighting yourselves to the enemies by saying you're in the capture zone, but then at the same time, as you said, then that makes the submarine incredibly exposed to a whole plethora of weapons that could be used to counter it.
Yeah, and, you know, during... And
Yeah.
normal, this is kind of stepping into the realm of reality submarines here. During... You can correct me if I'm wrong about this, but it's just kind of things that I've looked at and observed and done my homework on, blah blah blah. But submarines, when they're getting into any sort of, you know, like stalking, maybe a convoy ship, or destroyer or something, submarines did not move incredibly fast, because for a submarine to stay relatively undetected by sonar on destroyers, it had to move at about 4 knots, which is incredibly slow. While destroyers can run around at 23, 25 knots and just, you know. So sub gameplay would be extremely slow, and by the time your sub actually gets near the battlefield to not get picked up by sonar or anything, PT boats could have set down mines, or they could start just dumping depth charges into the water, and, you know. Submarines subs aren't incredibly fast, for example.
Yeah, and that offers actually another problem. Like, how do you counter a submarine in a destroyer? Well, obviously with depth charges, but currently they are always a research option. So there is this. So if you're stuck and the research doesn't get adapted to it, and you're a stock player, you have done everything right, you know there is a submarine, and you can't do anything about it. And that's just a bit bad, to be honest. Overall, I think the introduction of submarines just offers more problems than actual gameplay advantage. I mean, yes, it is more diversity, it is more, I don't know, bringing more vessel types into the game, but I think it's then, if it's done, then it's more done for the sake of bringing more stuff into the game, rather than bringing more effective fun or more diversity in terms of gameplay into it. So that's kind of the things that I think are, in my opinion, opposing the introduction of submarines.
Yeah.
Well, have any of you played the SF-40 Lekt or the Schwer, whatever the pronunciation?
I think Napalm would be perfect for pronouncing these.
Right.
If you, if you want.
Leichte und Schwere.
Leichte, fine. Let's go for Leichte.
There we go.
So Leichte. Right? So let's go with that. Right. That goes in arcade. So this is with a boosted, engine and everything. Stock, it goes around 20 kilometers an hour. Okay. The USS Belau is one of the most successful submarines of the war. Submerged, it goes at 16.2 kilometers an hour top speed. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So imagine how slow this is going to be going around the battlefield in realistic and even in arcade battles. Like you're not gonna. It's gonna have the light cruiser issue where you spawn so far away from a point, and it's gonna take you years to get to anywhere. You're basically gonna be spawning at the back of the map, shooting your torpedoes, jaying out, and getting into something more useful. Unless you can incorporate them like they've done helicopters, where they add in something making them crazy easy to spawn in, or something like that, or getting rid of their counter. By, once again, as we've seen in helicopters, where they just massively ranked up the price of airplanes.
Yeah, but I think it really depends. Let's say you put U-boats, submarines into it, and I think, where do you let them spawn? And this is now actually a problem with one of the solutions for the destroyer problem. Destroyers going firsthand just after the PT boats. And my solution would have been shallow water where a destroyer can not really enter it, or a mine barrier with the depth set to the mine so that the destroyer cannot pass it. And that would be really great as a solution, in my opinion, so that you kind of have to work like shooting the mines or torpedoing them, whatever kind of floats your boat, pun intended, to destroy it. And so when you then want to make submarines viable, you need to have a certain depth in this area so that submarines can actually go up and down to kind of avoid depth charges or accurate depth charges, where they have kind of a certain depth where they're going off. And that already requires a depth of 100 meters, to make it viable. If you look at the dispersion ratio of the depth charges and the certain submarines, how fast they go up and down in the vertical water column. So there is that. And when you say about the fastest submarine, or one of the most successful ones, the most used, I think, in the Second World War, at least in the European theater, was the Type 7 from the Germans, if I'm not mistaken, and that was going underwater at maximum 7 knots. And that is like standing still. That is literally like standing still. So you just have no way to go. So again, that just shows, in my opinion, that submarines are not a good option. And if Gaijin wants to consider introducing them, then at a later point, like with ATGMs, they were not introduced as the first thing there was.
Well, here's the thing, right? So I'm massively, mainly when it comes to gameplay, focusing on mechanics, because we can add in supersonic jets, we can add in larger ships, we can add in all of this stuff, and that sounds great. But for me, I like seeing stuff that benefits the whole game. So what mechanics would you like to see added to ships, which could make it, more interesting? Because right now I'm really loving rank 1 and rank 2. Ship arcade rank 1 and rank 2 is so fun. Very fast, a lot of guns, a lot of torpedoes. You can use them tactically because you can recharge them. You can go around the battlefield really quickly. Every ship or every boat seems to have some kind of place in the game, which is great. But when I think about, above that, what mechanics can we introduce to further, the gameplay experience?
And I think that's actually a good question. Or I can kind of convert this into a question. What would be, let's say your top 3 things you'd like to see either added to naval battles or changed to naval battles? One of those 2 things. Yeah.
So I think the top thing for me would be seeing additional or alternative game modes. And when first the Arctic Convoy mission or mission was introduced, I thought it would be a really great opportunity to further develop it. And maybe one team as a completely new thing. One team is the defending team, and the other one is the attacking one. And so the defending one should be around the merchant ships, and they are in the, let's say, slightly better ships with a bit more firepower, artillery-wise. But then the attacking team is in the more torpedo-heavy section, and on the outer side there are some icebergs to provide you with a little bit of cover. Obviously, this is not easy to introduce like this, and it works. There has to be a lot of research done how to put it up. But the first where we actually tried it, it was promising, and that's like 2 years ago, something like this, the last time that I've seen it. And so in general, alternative game modes, something that is not just go into this round capture zone, cap it, and win the game by that.
Yeah, I think the last time I saw, or I last saw gameplay of the convoy game mode is back when Fly covered it, when it was new in the craze. That's about the last time I saw it, because at the time I didn't watch much else aside from like Fly and.
It was hard as hell to get out there and sink one of those things. Those AI protection chips were very accurate. You had to get that torpedo launched from a long way.
Yeah, I think. Did the AI convoy ships that you're meant to destroy dodge the torpedoes at all?
No, they kept on a constant course. The convoy transports, yeah, and actually the protection ships did as well. They didn't deviate from their course. It's just if you got close enough for them to get their guns on you, they were gonna get their guns on you, or fuck you up so bad you didn't want it. You wish you hadn't gone out there.
That's always the way I like my battles.
Yeah.
I wish I didn't go out there.
Yeah, at least you know you're awake now. You got punched in the.
I tell you what it reminded me of, because I played that game mode as well. It was when the tribal class destroyer was announced, and they had the close beta or whatever. It reminded me of back in the day, an Aerialistic where you used to have AI planes on each side, and they would just target hunt somebody. They would just decide this dude over here needs to die. And and they had unlimited ammo, they had unlimited fuel, and they were like, "You're going down. I'm in a biplane, but I'm going at 800 kilometers an hour." Like that was how it felt to me, like in the CCBT. But I think that game mode could work if the AI was just relaxed a little. You could even do it as like a PvE kind of thing, like a co-op kind of thing, which would be kind of interesting. We don't really have any of those game modes really in War Thunder when it comes to actual making good RP and stuff. Like you have the PvE game modes, but you know the general player, if they want to grind, is not going to really play them.
I don't know. It's not lucrative. It takes way too much time.
Yep.
I think
PvE for naval is an excellent combination. I think it's a much slower pace of gameplay, I guess.
I can see
it offers more.
Being way more fun.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of modes as well. You could have sort of asymmetrical modes, like sort of supporting a naval invasion of an island, like on the Pacifics. You can have sort of landing craft, dropping off AI tanks while one team tries to defend the beach, and other teams assaulting it. I think there's a whole
all
host
those
of
kinds of missions like they have now for the planes and the tanks and everything. It's so much with the naval that I think you're right. That could be something that could draw this mode. The whole crowd. Well, not the whole crowd, because I still want to shoot people.
Oh, sorry, just to jump in. Napalm's down below. He said, "Could someone drag him up, please?"
Oh, did Napalm? Yep, I got
Yeah.
him.
Thank you.
There we go. So here's a question mainly for the. We jumped a small gap here, but going back on the more of the introductory scale of things. So this is more of an interest for me, and I think some of the guys in the chat might find interest too. What got you interested in helping? Just, wanting to be a part of the War Thunder staff. In particular, Gruber and Smin, because I know you two have been around probably far longer than me. What made you want to be a part of the staff? And, give us your kind of experience with that.
For me, actually before I even had a PC, I was an Xbox player, and I used to really enjoy the Sturmovik games. And I actually found War Thunder from Birds of Steel, whether any of you guys remember that. It used to be like the console version of Wings of Prey, and obviously I saw Gaijin, did some research, found it on PC, so I used my really old laptop, started playing the game on then, and then I just got really sort of interested in the potential of the game. When I first started, obviously it was just air. There was a whole host of planes that could be added, and I used to spend a lot of my evenings actually after playing just writing up suggestions. That was how I got into the team actually. I used to come up with vehicle suggestions. I used to pop down to a couple of local museums, and I used to really enjoy the research side of things, just finding out about new vehicles, interesting vehicles, and the famous, the obscure, the rare. and I guess it just really interested me of the potential of where the game could go. So I just wanted to become involved, however I could contribute and work towards it. So starting off as a moderator, that was a great avenue for me. But then obviously progressing up, I just have a real interest in really pushing feedback, bug suggestions, really getting the game as open to as many people as possible, but also as enjoyable to as many people as possible. The people that love history, the people that love the events, the battles, the vehicles, just everything that can be possible. Just becoming involved really was the best part for me.
Nice. What about you, Gruber?
Let's see. I found War Thunder because the first-person shooter clan I was in was dying out because Call of Duty was dying out. Call of Duty 2 first-person shooter clans and stuff. And a buddy of mine was playing IL. Well, he went to go play IL-2 from this game, but he found this game and mentioned it to a few of us because we didn't want to go play World of Tanks. So we came and played in the airplanes. Back then, there were 20 levels. There were only 3 upgrades per plane. What was it? Ammo, the panels, and then I can't remember what the third one was. But anyway, love of the game and was what made me want to be a staff member. And they actually did an advertisement that hit the launcher, sorry. And I wouldn't have seen it otherwise because it didn't go to the forums or the website for that matter. I just played. So I saw an advertisement and they listed all the different moderator jobs. I saw one, tech moderator, which is basically what I do in IT now. People report bugs, you try it out, you test it, you verify it, you report it, you get it fixed. And, it's what I do. And I got plenty of time on my hands, so I volunteered. Like I said, remember earlier, I had probably less than 500 posts in the forums when I joined. I didn't do much talking. Oh, I know for a fact, now that I think about it, I probably had less than 200.
Yeah.
I still remember your first day, Rick.
Yeah, because you're my boss. Yeah, and to be that's funny. I'm glad you said that, Scott, because I didn't know we got. I had no idea.
What was that? Sorry, you cut out there.
I said I didn't know we got paid. I had no idea. Somebody said something about paid. I was like, what? Huh? Paid? Oh, well, isn't that fancy?
Just as a quick question, let's do a roll. So, how old are you, Gruber?
I'm qualified as a git.
Collusion?
I am 20.
Napalm?
Way too old.
Smin?
I'm 22.
You guys are touchy about your age.
I'm the old.
I think I am one of the youngest members of the staff team. I like to think, anyway.
I think I'm the youngest CM, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I would imagine so.
No. Orson is younger than you, I thought.
No way.
I think, I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I think
Awesome
Tommy's
is
older.
younger than you.
I'm living at his mother's house eating cake. Oh, never mind.
I think he's just on his GCSE.
Yeah, he's still going to school, I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah. I suppose, to be honest, I always picked members of than figured. They're actually a lot younger than I figured.
I'm the grandpa of the group, right? 46. Oh, hold on a second. I have to do the math. Yeah, I'm 40. I said 45 earlier, but I did not.
Double me plus 2.
Hey, nobody has
Oh,
to
God.
actually do
That's
your
a
side
word.
of the math on this, right? You didn't have to remind me of all of that. It was unnecessary.
The one thing that I've seen a lot with maybe content creators, but also just the general community. A lot of people played like World of Tanks first, and then they got into War Thunder, like either via an ad or because they didn't like the arcadey stuff. Was that like a progression any of you guys had, or was it just I like flight sims? I found a cool flight sim.
Well,
For me, it was
planes
definitely the
got me
flight
in
sim.
first. Yeah, planes were out way before years before the tanks. When the tanks arrived, I actually once the tanks arrived, I went back because of course I still had contacts with that clan, and they had a lot of them, started their own tank clan within the clan. So I went over and got them to come try it out, and it was too real for most of them.
Yeah.
I went over and tried their version. It was too arcadey for me, and I played arcaded. But I like hitting the tank where it needs to be hit to do the damage you need to do. I like that. I love that. And they don't have that. They have total hit points, and you draw down, and that's not the same.
Yeah.
Well, for me, I started with planes in March 2013, and it was a video by Jingles that randomly, popped up in the suggestion box, and this is how I came to play War Thunder. Then it took a while, a few months, before I actually began to play casually World of Tanks. I was not too interested in it, but nevertheless made my way up to tier 10, and then gradually War Thunder Tanks came into play, and they started obviously also with a closed beta, and it was not enjoyable in the closed beta. It was
No, it was not.
It was actually unplayable for me personally. Not unplayable, but very much not enjoyable. And so I gave it a bit of time. From now and then I played and still went through the grinding and then progression wipes and all those things. And then I came to really love it when I then had a bit of a feel for it. But the learning curve was quite steep. And I think what actually turned me away from World of Tanks was the fact that it was with a stock crew. It was unplayable, especially with a scout, because you were absolutely useless. You were a bad thing for your team. And, to not see where you get shot from repeatedly, especially in an endgame scenario, this is where War Thunder really cut it for me. And especially having more feel to it, not just having more the feel of driving a tank, not just hunting pixels over the screen, was an absolute winner for me. Nevertheless, I think nothing is perfect, and there is still a lot of room for improvement within War Thunder. And I think, again, this comes down to the awesome word potential. The building blocks are there, and it's just a matter of rearranging them. It's just a matter of, using your mind to imagine stuff and making new game modes, making maybe even a bit of a decompression in terms of the balance. And overall, there are, again, multiple workplaces, and points where you can just put in a lever and change War Thunder for the better. The potential is there. The engine can do much more things than World of Tanks, in my opinion. And so this is what actually has Gaijin with War Thunder the absolute winner at hand. And add to this now the holy trilogy of tanks, planes, and ships and helicopters. But you see, there is so much that could be done. And for years we are hunting for capture zones.
Capture zones? What do you mean?
We are hunting for the capture zones. That's kind of the only
Oh,
objective.
you want different like objectives and stuff, right? Because like
Yeah,
when somebody uses like the word potential, it's just like what a useless word. And when people say, you know, oh, War Thunder has this potential to do stuff, it could be better. I mean, it needs to be qualified. That statement doesn't mean anything. You know, it has nothing to it apart from I would like this game to be better, which is what everybody wants. But nobody agrees on how it should be better. Now, when it comes to like game mode discussion and stuff like that, the problem with either objective-based gameplay or siege-based gameplay, which is the two options the majority of people brought up, it favors one side over the other. And as we've seen with the events, like the festive event that we have every year, where you're thrown into, you know, historical battles, which I personally like, the majority of people will just play the side that wins the most because they want to win. So you've somehow got to balance that, and no game in history has been able to do that yet, unless you have a scenario where both teams play both sides of said scenario at the same time.
Yeah, you're, you know, there's a reason I like doing these podcasts. This is going to be slightly off topic, so bear with me for a minute. But I just saw G-Leader typed in chat, he's like, is it me or is TEC clashing? And, you know, he may not. However, I don't necessarily, like, I don't mind it, because sometimes it's not always the best thing to just have everybody in a constant agreement. Because then, you know, it's like sheep. It's like when the first sheep goes, the rest go.
If you come to if you want a circle jerk, you come to the wrong place. I generally disagree with a lot of the community sentiments, just because a lot of them are either unrealistic or don't make a lot of sense, such as battleships, such as supersonic jets. Like I look at the other side of the coin instead of just going, "Wouldn't this be cool to add, please, Gaijin?"
I think a healthy discussion is what improves the game. If you have the same people saying the same thing over and over again, it doesn't allow for experimentation. It also doesn't allow for, you know, future prospects. You've got to be open to all areas, and you've got to have a discussion with every single type of player. You can't just, you know, implement something because a set amount of people want large ships or a set amount of people want this.
Yep.
I think disagreement discussion and reasonable discussion is always the way forward.
Reasonable discussion. I like yelling and screaming. It accomplishes so much. It accomplishes nothing. I'm sorry.
That's Reddit's favorite approach too. But you know, we've got to have all kind of discussions. Every different platform we've got opens us to a new form of suggestions and other, I guess, just different viewpoints that may offer something that someone on the forum might not like, or someone in some subsection may not like. You've got to be open to all these different areas, because that's where, you know, the one unique idea that someone hasn't considered before comes up, and it sparks a new discussion, and it sparks some new voices. And, you know, it really is beneficial when you have this kind of discussion.
Yeah, it's been kind of crazy to me, like setting up the like TEC hub, like the Discord channel, and then getting the team together to run it and everything. We have like this little room. It's basically called Q&A with TEC. So anybody can put in the question, and as long as you ping me, I'll answer it. And the amount of interesting and creative ideas that have come through that have been amazing to me. Things I've never even thought about. And it just shows to me that the community has so many cool, interesting ideas on how to do stuff, but also that nobody agrees on what should be done.
That's the hard part. Getting people to agree on a singular topic can sometimes be the most challenging.
Yeah.
Because you ask something simple, like for example, if you ask someone, name one vehicle that you would say is completely necessary to be added for War Thunder, and I guarantee you, over a sample of be that 10 or 100 people, you will get 100 different answers for what is the most needed vehicle right now. Just on something like that. But you could do the same thing for game mode, you could do the same thing for features. You know, everyone has their own sort of perspective on.
Yeah, and it's really fun to talk about. You know,
yeah,
because there's so many different ideas coming out. Like a lot of people, when it comes to aircraft, a lot of people are talking about adding the B-26, and I think that is a good shout. You know, there's a lot of them made. Yeah. It makes sense to add in, But the question is, you brought up, you you didn't say should be added, but you say like kind of has an effect on the gameplay or whatever. The B-26 does not, because we already have planes in the game which do exactly what it would do. So from that point of view, it's kind of pointless. But from a historical point of view, it makes sense.
It's a very significant aircraft, I'd agree, and it's one I would really like to see too. It's unique in its own way, I guess. It's kind of, a mixture, as you said, of already existing aircraft, but it offers something new and it's very significant. So, yeah, I think that it's not just the ones that are needed for gameplay. I think, in a lot of updates, there's always a little surprise waiting for someone that, the majority may not see as... You get a lot of comments sometimes on the website when you do a devlog on a certain aircraft. You'll get a huge bunch of people saying, well, this is pointless, it doesn't have ATGMs, it's not a rank 6 jet, so why are you adding this? But then you also get the people that are like, I've been waiting 5 years for this aircraft, my suggestion was on the forum, and this is where it all comes from. It takes, obviously takes a while to get a suggestion through, but not just suggestions. Some of these vehicles don't have a wealth of information, but it's the rare and unique ones that are sometimes the most appreciated sometimes. Not because they offer a new style of gameplay or they're, reinventing the wheel, but just because they're a nice, separate, unique little thing.
Yeah, I'll give you a personal experience I had. So most recently, most of the time, every patch, like there's one or two vehicles I've either never heard of or only read about very, very lightly, and this time was the Ju-288C. And so I have this book. I have no idea where I put it, but it's basically written by, I believe it's William Green. It's all about
Warplanes of the Third Reich, the big one.
Yeah, Warplanes of the Third Reich. Yeah, it's a brilliant book. Bloody expensive though. But
definitely recommended. If anyone listening wants a good read on German aircraft, that is a fantastic book.
Yeah, it's really in depth. Has a bunch of pictures, so you don't always have to read everything, but I would say to read it as well. And I read the pages on the Ju-288C, and its history is crazy. Like it's one of those one of those planes that is cool to read about, and that to me is what War Thunder is when it comes to the vehicles I don't really know. Like it gives me ideas to expand my knowledge, and I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most important things from many historical video games, is it inspires a new generation, I guess, in certain ways. People that wouldn't read about these obscure prototypes or the development history, or sometimes the politics behind, what does it take to get an aircraft through a design stage, and what does a tank require to go through production trials and things like that. There's a lot of interesting stories, not just of the manufacturers, but the people behind them too. And I think a game that encompasses all of that really does get people interested, which is one of the most important things for me.
Yeah, I think, the way I see War Thunder is a really good way of bringing people. You can learn a lot from War Thunder, basically. Sure, things might not be 100% accurate all the time, but, Gretchen does their best to get it on track. A lot of the vehicles we have in game are pretty much there in terms of information available and other bits and pieces like that.
And now we run into the big headache of my time, which over this last year or so. Now, it's great that we have vehicles in game which have a lot of information. Over the last year or so, we've had a lot of vehicles added to the game which do not have a lot of information. I'm basically talking about rank 6 ground vehicles here. And the amount of times I've had to talk to people about the fact that the majority of the information on these vehicles is classified, and you cannot know what the armor values are. You cannot know some of the penetration standards and all this. And the indicators are that we're going even more forward in history. We have a 2010 helicopter in game now. And for me, the charm, which, is there for War Thunder when it comes to the historical side, a part which we as a community can talk about and discuss, is kind of, well, it's getting destroyed by this emphasis on more modern vehicles. So the question is that okay to let go if people want these modern vehicles? Or is it, is it a sacrifice willing to make? I think is the best way to put it, in your opinion.
I think, this is just personally my opinion, when it comes to, information on vehicles is... Okay, this this is sidetrack way, but I do this a lot, so my bad. You know, I kind of go off on a slightly different topic, but I try to come back to the actual point. But it's like when people ask for prototype stuff or paper stuff, we have the Panther 2 and the 10.5 Tiger in the game. Those two vehicles weren't necessarily built together, but the parts were made. It's, you know, I don't mind stuff that if all the parts are there, you can throw it into the game.
No, the Panther 2, the Panther 2 iteration that we have in game, the parts were never made. Like the turret is fictional completely, and same with the R2Y2. So that's another example.
I know that there was an R2Y2 prop plane that was meant as a recon plane that wasn't actually.
No,
that's the R1.
That's the R1.
Yeah. R1, my bad. But...
And the only thing that we know of that might have existed on the R2Y2 is that a fuselage may have been built of the first one. That's literally all we know. So, and that is from one source, from one book, which supposedly talked to one of the people working on it.
Yeah, it's quite hard to get information on anything.
I think in particular with the rank 6 stuff, in terms of information, you know, there is information out there, and obviously, as you said, these vehicles are popular. They're the ones that, from the April Fool's events, they've been the most popular class requested. But the thing to remember is they are finite. There is only a certain amount of modern you can go to before it hits a dead stop. And the game, you know, even since we've been adding, ever since New Era, since rank 6 came out, we still have been going backwards to the older planes and the older tanks too. It's never just been about constantly moving forward. Of course, the game does move forward, and a new update has a theme. So, for example, the New Era update focused on rank 6, but obviously there was older inclusions too. And I don't think the game's ever going to step away from that. It's never going to step away from not only the core principles of air, land, and sea, but also the themes that it encompasses. There is a whole host of World War II machines we've explored, but also there's a whole host we could still explore and will be explored, obviously. It's not just about moving forward. And regarding some of the prototypes have been necessary for a certain position in the tree, and some of them, obviously the situation has changed. Obviously the Panther 2, we've already discussed that before previously. That kind of vehicle was included in a day where we didn't have rank 6. We didn't have a lot of even the top rank 5, so it was necessary for the Germans to have that. Obviously things have changed quite drastically now, and that will be reviewed later down the line, but it won't constantly be, you know, oh, modern vehicles are the way forward, that's it now. There will be no more World War II, there'll be no more Cold War. It will always be a case of there'll be a theme for an update, you know, like we had the Japanese tanks, we had the Italian air, the French air and ground, but also it goes backwards. Every update contains generally something for everyone. The naval update obviously was the launch of naval forces, so that was the main thing, but even then it included some ground forces, it included some air, and it will always be that way. That's the core part of it.
Yeah, the modern stuff, it is, like, I understand over the last year it's been quite a main focus, and that's good, because you need to flesh it out, unless you run into situations where literally every update, when a new top tier vehicle was added, you know, you'd have people proclaiming that it was OP compared to everything else, and you know, so on and so forth. So now it's pretty much fleshed out, apart from, you know, I would say the minor nations, you know, Britain, France, and Japan in the game, and obviously Italy. I think hopefully now that Naval's out as well, we have like more of a balance towards lower tier vehicles and upper tier vehicles. And I'm sure, you know, with the last update kind of showed that. You know, we're going back to that, and I'm happy about that.
It's not always just adding new vehicles as well. We always have a commitment as well to redoing some of the old models. That's always been an ongoing theme over the last couple of years. A lot of the classics that are still from the Wings of Prey and the Birds of Steel games, they've been with us for a long time and they've served their duties well, but obviously all things have to be updated in the end. And we do like to go back and revisit some of the fan favorites. Obviously the Spitfires have been done, some of the Russians low tiers, some of the German low tiers, the Messerschmitts, recently some of the American Cats too. And I think that's also a nice little thing, because it offers the opportunity to also develop them more, like for example giving them significant historical skins, and the small little things like that as well that I think people enjoy. Getting a new camouflage for a plane maybe they've enjoyed playing a while back, and it just offers a new approach to something, makes you go back and play it again, and you know, gives you a fresh perspective.
Anybody remember the My Little Pony jets on the first?
Oh, the first April Fools.
Oh, I
yeah.
love that. That was great.
That was the best thing ever. End of discussion.
I think
We got
That
a
was.
we
that
got
is-
a complaint from a guy. Sorry to cut you off. We got a complaint from a guy who said his daughter cried her eyes out waiting a whole year to play him again, and then I just want to say.
Is there not a custom?
Yeah, on War Thunder
Mission?
Live you can download them, yeah. Yeah, one of the developers uploaded it on there for everyone to go back and enjoy. So if you do want to go back to the old days of 2013 with the ponies, you can play some missions with that on War Thunder Live.
Does it is it updated to the current game?
It was last time I saw it. I haven't actually gone back and seen it for quite a while, so it may be now that it doesn't work. But if it doesn't, just let me know and I'll.
I'm sure if it
See if I can-
doesn't, then one of the
Yeah, we can look into that.
always
No
poke one
biggie.
of the War Thunder Live mods and or I poke it because I tend to follow the whole, the whole hierarchy system. Got your normals, then got your seniors, got the guys above that, and I follow that. I try not to overstep that and just jump straight to the guys at the top and be like, oh, this is blah blah blah.
Just seeing in chat, 75 Soul mentioned KI-32. That was another one I liked as well in a recent update. I think that was 3 patches ago, was it? The little low-tier Japanese attacker.
Yeah,
Love that one.
I did enjoy flying the Key-32. That was plain up.
That's the one with the machine gun on the wing, right?
Yeah, it's
and no
the-
other machine gun. Oh god,
it's
that thing's horrible.
It's the Japanese Blenheim, basically.
Yeah. It's got hardly any bombs. It's got, for some reason, a wing-mounted machine gun. It's got no power in the engine. Yeah, what a wonderful. God damn.
It
I love
turns
flying
great.
the oddities. It has an excellent camo too, just throwing that out there. It's got a lovely
yeah.
secondary.
I've just noticed a question up here by Varen von Delta. On the subject, are they considering late World War /interwar vehicles?
We already have a
Okay.
couple of interwar vehicles, the A1E1 Independent and a couple of the other low-tier vehicles are
I think-
sort of from the interwar period.
A lot of people don't realize this because people kind of just dismiss them as, troll tanks or, really OP tanks or, whatever they want to class them as. But a lot of the multi-turret tanks you see for like a couple of hundred GE and Tier 1 are actually World War I tanks. As Smin mentioned, one of them being the A1E1 Independent, I think there's is it the Nabal Fahrzeug?
Yeah,
I'm
it's
not
another
aware of
interwar
a
one.
single multi-tier turreted tank that actually started World.
No, they're all interwar. I don't think any of them
All of
are
them.
exactly, yeah. But for
Almost
example, the
every
Fury Mark
first
1,
tier-
Well, the A1E1 was built in, what, 25, 24? Something like that.
yeah, something around that. I know the Fury Mark 1 we've got is a 1931 aircraft, so that's probably the youngest aircraft we have in game, unless I'm mistaken.
Well, I can tell you the Ask the Devs or the video show or whatever. they were asked that question and answered it this way, that the tier 1 of everything is that level that you're asking for, and to go back any further would be to put things into the game that just weren't fun. Because look at the French tank line. You've got that big thing that to me looks like a World War I tank. All of them, and they're big, they're slow, and they're not fun. And then to get put on Maginot in one of those, which is realistic, sucks. You can't get across Maginot close enough to use that cheap little weapon on anything because you can't get in range. It takes a long time to get there.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, no, I was just going to say, I think that's partially due to tank doctrine as well. World War I tank doctrine is significantly different to interwar and even early war tank doctrine.
At the start of World War II, the Germans introduced a new doctrine called Blitzkrieg. Everybody else was using the doctrine called, this thing's an infantry support vehicle.
Yep.
Yeah, but the grind, the spading process by playing the Tier 1 tanks was horrible.
Horrible.
The French Tier 1 tanks were kind of one of the recent shockers for me, and they were not fun. And
No,
suddenly,
they weren't.
and
You're correct.
suddenly, you know, those not so shiny Russian or German tanks, for instance, that didn't look that spectacular, suddenly became those monsters on the battlefield that you just had tried to do everything that you knew to gun one of those down. You know, a Panzer IV was like this steel behemoth or whatever you want to call it, and you were just like in your little French potato truck tank thingy, and then just, oh, mercy, it took me 5 minutes to get here, let me get one shot off. It was it was really, for me it was jaw dropping, and I always thought, yeah, you know, with a bit of skill you can overcome anything. French tanks said no. It was really like that. And yeah,
no.
no. And I was really glad when this kind of spading was done. And then it got better. Then you got some of the American tanks, or you know, the chassis, and then a French tank on top of it. I think it's always cool to drive around in an M10, or you know, the first Sherman, and then the SA-50 Sherman, and so on. And then really at Tier 4, it really kicked off with the enjoyment. You know, Lorraine 40T, MX-50, MX M4. They were a really great tank. And what I also really enjoyed was the introduction of the spotting mechanic, which gave and also the ability to repair tanks for light tanks, which got introduced with the French tanks. And I really enjoyed this. So very often in a light tank, you put yourself into a position, you know, you worked really hard, then you get one shot off, and suddenly everybody knows that you're there. And with the spotting mechanic, you know, you could just spot the most important targets, and actually could select which tank gets spotted, and then get set under pressure from your team, and then you can actually exploit the situation that you're in furthermore. And I really enjoyed this. I think this was one of the best introductions ever into War Thunder. The problem, therefore, is that the British and the Germans in particular have kind of a lack of light tanks. And for the Germans, I think very often it gets raised, yeah, but the RE251 is there, and the British have no counter. I agree, but that's a premium tank, and in my opinion, there must be, not exactly at the same battle rating, but around this battle rating, a light tank for the Germans as well, and the British desperately need also some of them. And one of the best and easiest changes, I think, that I can recall for the Germans was when simply the Sonderkraftfahrzeug 234-2, the Puma, was actually set to rank 2, you know, and suddenly it could scout. So now this vehicle, before it was nice, now it has a lot more value for our lineup in this respect. And from that point on, I think there is no light tank for the Germans, and especially in the tech tree, the first light tank then is the Begleitpanzer.
Well, the only light tank I think Britain has is what, the AEC Mark II. Does it have any? So our only one is a gift premium, so it's even worse than the RU251. On top of this, I'm not too bothered about that. The big issue I think for Britain right now is the big 4.7 to 7.7 gap in AA, where you have a useless AA at 4.7, or not useless, but pretty useless, and you have to up tier it into, you know, 5.7, 6.7, even 7.3 if you don't want to up tier yourself with an AA. So, to be honest, like, yeah, the light tank is an issue. Oh yeah, the Warrior as well. Thanks, Fred. So we have the Warrior as well, which was just added. So it would be nice to see more light tanks. We created light tanks, or at least stuff you could see as light tanks. But I think the mechanic of AA, or the actual machine that are AA, that needs to be fixed before we start thinking about adding other vehicles with other mechanics to the British tree.
Yeah, I mean the AA problem is also the same that you have with the Russian, at around the same battle rating.
Yeah.
But the British have very strong, or had very strong CAS, and it's still, you know, there. But the big strength of a lot of those British planes is
wait. Which what strong cast? Like, give me some example.
I said they had it with the
Yeah. What are the examples?
with the Spitfire Mark 22 and Mark 24, when the rockets, before the rocket rework, they were just really painful, because with one rocket you could take out a Target 2 or even a mouse, and that was just too strong. And then, you know, the Mosquitoes, the Brigand, the Hornet, if I'm not mistaken, they had a huge variety of rocket and bomb things that they could, or ordnance in general, that they could use. And the Tempest with the two 1,000-pound bombs, or the 8 RP3 rockets, the big strength was not just that they could take out one or multiple tanks, but immediately go then into the fighter role, with not being punished so heavily by losing the altitude. So, because they are still very capable in turn fights, although, you know, energy fight is to be preferred.
Right. So
But
since we live in the present day, the issue with that is all what you just said doesn't exist anymore. The only thing
Yes,
that
I
does
think bombs are
exist,
still
the
very-
only thing that does exist is the turn fight thing and the 1,000-pounders on the Tempest. Bombs have been nerfed into the ground. Rockets have had their damage models improved, which I think is a great move. You know, it was so annoying seeing planes take over games. You know, SP costs of planes have increased by a lot. So all of these factors have neutered, you know, these British, the British cast that you talk about. The only ones which are useful now are either the Typhoon, the Tempest, and maybe the Hornet, if you want to throw that in. But even then, it has really limited options.
I mean,
I think we're always.
Oh, sorry.
It's always important. No, I was gonna say it's always important to, obviously, when these trees are out, we still do go back and look at gaps that need filling, and obviously battle ratings are a dynamic part that does change. So certain brackets may be void of a certain class at certain cases in certain nations as well. Particularly with Japanese, it was a struggle to get the Type 87 because it was just so hard to get information on certain Japanese machines. And I think many nations, including Britain, for example, there are cases where you can find a few photographs of certain types, but often it's more than a photograph is needed. And there obviously are examples out there, and suggestions on the forum, and any kind of historical photos that get shared, it always helps. And obviously there's Lend-Lease examples, there's the Canadian skink and other things like that. So there are options that can and you possibly will be explored in the future. It's just a case of when enough information can be found on them, and when enough comes forward. It is important, obviously, to go back and fill these gaps, and that's what's been happening slowly over the process of the years with the German tree. Obviously, we've been talking about light tanks recently, the TAM, and before that the Black Panzer, and even the low rank wheeled vehicles like the Pumas. Those have been slowly being added to the game, and I'm sure many more will come for the other nations too. It's just a case of when the documentation comes forward and when the photographs are found and things like that. And obviously there's lots of modeling work to be done on these vehicles. Often they're not just simple machines, and they're not just existing variants of tanks we have in game in certain cases.
Yeah, and that's the funny thing, right? Because about a year ago, I started looking into AA that could be added to the game for the Soviets and the British. For the Soviets, I found a few decent examples. You know, they added on a T-34 chassis, they added a ridiculously large gun, and we're like, "Yep, this is designed to shoot down aircraft." Cool. But they also made the ZSU 37-2, which is pretty much what we have in game, but with two 37s. So that could easily be added. On top of it, I think they had a version which had like radar or something ridiculous. So you could even add that in. For the British, it was crazy limited on what you could add. So I can understand there being a gap there when it comes to vehicles.
It's sometimes the case that you have to mess around with. Obviously, one of the big confusing factors that confuses people in game is when the Americans were first added, we didn't have the British tree, and we added the Grant as an American premium.
Yeah.
And we have also the M4A5, I believe, which is the Ram. That was also a Canadian vehicle. And at the time, the Americans actually had a bit of a gap there on the premium situation. So did the British, but it fit the American tree better at the time. And obviously, since then, we've had the Grant added as a British event vehicle. But sometimes there are other cases where sometimes a Lend-Lease vehicle can plug the gap, or a vehicle like the Stridswagen, the Centurion with the Swedish modification, a vehicle essentially designed in Britain, but also leased out to the Swedish, who then took their own take on it. Sometimes that can be implemented into the tree. So, it just depends when an opportunity presents itself. There's sometimes examples that can be used. It's just a case of finding the right information and finding all the things necessary to reproduce it faithfully.
So here's a question back on the topic of, tanks and armored cars and whatnot. Or this is going into a new topic, actually. Yeah, but anyway. So, as we all know by now, Alcon After and BVVD, I think I said it right, hopefully I did, they had a Q&A sort of thing. And I noticed as I was scrolling through it that it said that the Italian tank tech tree was going to have the most armored cars, or will have more armored cars than basically all the other nations we have in game. So I'm wondering if the Italian tech tree is going to be much less focused on, having really strong tanks and whatnot, but more having mobile armored cars that can help deal with tanks. I'm just kind of wondering if it's going to be a totally different playstyle to just running in there with a tank and getting shot at and shooting back at people.
Well, I can answer that for you. The Italians didn't have any strong tanks.
So you don't wrong.
Tanks were armored cars.
Yeah, the machines that they had, which had large guns on them, there was one, which was the Smin1080 9053, I think. And then you had the Smin1080 7643 or 7543, but everything else has quite small caliber guns on them, and also not a lot of armor, because the doctrine that they employed was not really designed for tank-on-tank combat. It was much more about maneuverability. It was much more about breaking through. It was much more designed around, climbing mountains and stuff. And when it comes to their armored cars, a lot of them are literally just cars or trucks they've stuck massive guns on and just been like, have at thee, So it's actually going to be quite fun.
Oh, I'm looking forward to now that you said that.
Yeah, I mean, if you look into War Thunder, what's already in there, with some of the Russian or the American trucks with the 75, 76 millimeter guns, let me just look it up. They are hilarious to a certain point, but really making them a serious player is something that I actually do not want to bet my money on. With the M3 GMC, the tech tree version, it has the 75 millimeter, and it is quite fun. On a half track, it's again a lot of variety in the game. And with the Russians, they have one of those as well, the Su-57, and I bet somewhere in the deepest depths of Russia, there are still some field modifications to be found. The same for America or whatever they had, in mind.
Yeah.
And a lot of those are really nice, especially, and this is now my opinion, if you have a decent horsepower to ton ratio, if you have ridge lines, like for instance, again, the Maginot Line map, where when you can actually move and position yourself. This is fun. It's a different playstyle. It's something different. It's not for everybody, but I like to see this. And if the if the Italian focus on this, well, they just need the right allies with some heavier tanks. And we have always, or let's say mostly, not just one nation per side. So this is where they could play together with the Russians or the Germans, for instance, that bring a bit more armor to it. And this would actually, get in really nicely if you compare it with the French. They have also sometimes relatively mobile tanks with decent guns, but not the greatest armor, and it works out for them. Sometimes you need the right mixture between armor and mobility, and despite the firepower being the same, it's always how the map design works out. And I think one thing that I actually want to mention here is the map rotation. If you get kind of Karelia in the high tier map.
Before you go into map rotation, I just want to correct something. So when you think about armored cars, you think about fast, you think about cool little things, right? Which are speeding around the battle.
Not always.
The Italians didn't have these. The Italians had unreliable engines with low horsepower with heavy vehicles. So just to give an example, the one which I talked about before, the truck which had the 90mm on it, it's called the Lancia 3RO. It's a big flatbed truck. It weighs about 5,140 kilos. Its max speed without the massive gun on it was 32 kilometers an hour. We're looking at much more of a 29k situation than we are of tanks whizzing around or armored cars whizzing around the battlefield.
Yeah, that's the other side of the coin. If they could have very fast tanks, that's just for the sake of it, it would be obvious for the playstyle. If they just rely on such, if they just rely on those ones, if they just rely on the rather slow ones, you know, with limited firing arcs and low horsepower to ton ratio, especially if they are based on trucks, you know, where you have your difficulties on inclinations, then I doubt that it will be the most popular tech tree.
Name a fast tank that Italy had.
I said it for the argument. You interrupted me.
Yeah, okay, but the argument is for Italian tanks and Italian armored cars. They don't.
Yeah, just said
when we talk about classical speeds, there isn't a fast. Is there not, or is there one?
I have to say that I don't know what kind of cars the Italians had. But I just wanted to say, if they have fast cars, I can imagine this playstyle. But if they only rely then on the slow ones, then you know, it's what I said. It's like, you know, then it will be not the most pleasant playstyle, because then you're lacking lots of things, like the standing power or to make a push, because it's not very enjoyable with a slow tank that has problems on going over ridgeline with limited firing arcs and having no armor to fight against tanks that have all the advantages in the on the other side.
Right. Well, all of the armored cars and all of the trucks that Italy used, they were either very, very low in number. Since you've got to remember the doctrine behind Italy at the start of World War II. First of all, they went for motorization. Right, motorization is the fact that you can move infantry around quickly with use of trucks. The problem with this is they couldn't produce enough trucks, and that is one of the big issues why they didn't go into mechanization, because they couldn't produce enough tanks either. So they tried motorization, then they tried to dip their hand in mechanization when it came to tanks. But overall, what you just ended up with was large, bulky trucks and very lightly armored slow tanks, and it just didn't work.
Keep in mind where they were fighting as well. A lot of that African fighting was that big old gun on that big old truck worked because it was the only damn thing there.
Oh, of course, yeah, it worked for the time period, but in game, what you were talking about is, once again, it's another 29k. And when do we ever see 29Ks in battle?
Oh, you'll be amazed sometimes. Yeah, it's pretty rare.
I would.
There's always that one player.
Yeah, the French tanks will be fun to play because they're going to be low BRs and they're going to have medium speed. They're not going to have a lot of armor. Their guns should do a decent amount of damage. But when you look at the armored cars or the trucks, no, they're not going to be fun at all. You're going to have crazily unstabilized guns, very slow trucks, and if they don't tweak, you know, how it's all going to work, like if they want to balance it and get rid of the realistic standards, fair enough, like for a bit of fun. Otherwise, you're going to have a ton of low tier trucks, which are just slow as all hell, trying to wander about.
Well, the question is if parts of the Italian tech tree will end up with captured tanks or with tanks that got from Germany. That is something that now comes into my mind just as we speak. And then we have again a situation like with the with some of the French tanks, and I don't know if they made any field modifications, but then again, it's a weird tech tree that I imagine.
I would honestly, what I would like to see out of the Italian tank tree is kind of a mixture of the Lend-Lease German stuff and then the later war Lend-Lease American stuff. Instead of just, you know, slapping some premiums in there. We could say the premiums are actually prototype tanks, or, you know, very, very small produced tanks. Kind of like the P40 Leoncello, or Leoncello, or however that goes.
I thought that was Italian made.
I think it's Leoncello.
Yeah, that is the last Italian vehicle that they actually produced when it came to tanks.
On the Thunder Show, it's Leoncello, and it's an Italian made. Yeah.
Heavy tank, technically.
Oh, for them, heavy, yes.
Heavy tank by the Italian standard.
Well, here's an interesting tidbit. So the Italians didn't actually name their tanks heavy, medium, and light down to the weight. They actually did it by like tactics. So what they were going to use it. So if you see something that's labeled as a light tank, but you're like, why is this thing 60 tons or something? Then you know why. Like it. And I'm sure in game that won't be, you know, replicated because it wouldn't really make a lot of sense for balance reasons. But on top of it, the problem I have with Italy is the same problem I have with Japan. At the time when Japan was introduced, we didn't have a rank 6. I think the latest tank they had was the Type 74 when they were introduced. I am still to this day an advocate of just cutting that tree off at rank 3 and just saying, right, there's all your Japanese vehicles. You don't need any captured American ones. And I'd be the same for the Italians. I'd just cut them at rank 2 and just be like, yeah, you don't need any more vehicles. And that may annoy a few people, but I don't like playing an American jumbo versus a French jumbo. Yeah. Right? I don't like facing the same vehicles. I find that really, really boring.
It's not so much boring in my experience, it just makes it a bit of, I mean, to a new player that'll be really confusing. It's like, why is there a French-American tank fighting an American-American tank? Or, you know.
Yeah.
I think that kind of thing's a little bit difficult, because you get, obviously, as you said, people have different perspectives on what they do and don't want to play. Some people do want tanks that served in a certain nation, but obviously I appreciate some don't, because they don't want to see, as you said, an example of the same tank effectively fighting each other. And it becomes difficult, like you say, with certain nations like Japan, because obviously after the war they just stopped building tanks for a period of time and then they started again and then they actually had some standout machines. So it's kind of a case of, do you just stop the tree entirely? Do you add some stopgaps so they can have their top ranks? And I think the Type 90, for example, was one of the most popular top rank tanks we have in game. So taking that away from Japan and saying you're stuck at rank 3, I think would be a bad thing for a significant number of people. But obviously, as you say, it's also the balance of finding, you know, how many allied vehicles do you give them, even though they use them, even though they're in active service. There are a lot of people that don't want to play them, a lot of people that don't mind playing them for the sake of getting a Japanese tree. It's a difficult subject, but it does allow for the implementation of some of their more unique machines at the top ranks too. So it's kind of one of the issues of when you have an ever expanding rank system, I guess, because there's no limit of what could be added to a certain degree. As I said, it is finite the number of vehicles that can come in, but it also poses the technical problem of what do you do for the nations that had a dark spot, maybe where they were under occupation, or they had a military embargo where they couldn't produce, things like that. So it's kind of different nation on nation. Obviously, the main allied nations didn't have that issue. Japan and Germany, even back in the aircraft days, there was always the question of what do you give them at rank 5, and that was ultimately solved with the Sabre and the MiG, and some like that and some didn't. And it was the same case with ground forces. You know, the French have enough of their own unique machines, but it's also bolstered by some of the American ones they used, and same with Japan.
Yeah, it's when it comes to certain vehicles for certain nations, it's really preference based. Like people want to through that. I find it's impossible to please both sides because it's just such a wide variety. And
I think the best way of dealing with it, like for me, I don't like rank 6, right? Never enjoyed it, probably never will enjoy it. So I just don't play it, right? Simple as. So that mindset I think would be hopefully one we can eventually instill into people. Just because something is made doesn't mean you have to play it. As I believe Esmond said earlier, there are so many facets to War Thunder now. You don't need to play everything. You don't need to play every part of the game to for it to give you a great experience. And I hope that is something that veterans and also new people can understand over time.
Yeah, this is kind of in this respect. I think there is War Thunder is a bit big for a player that doesn't play 24/7. To get everything and to get everything in every nation, in tanks, ships, planes, helicopters. It's I mean, even if you would do it for life, as a big YouTuber or as a streamer, it's a never-ending story. And at the end, I think a lot of people that I talk to, especially the clans that do a lot of squad play, they try to, how to say it, maximize their skill in one certain bracket. So there are clans that really, really enjoy their German planes, and they fly always with the fighters, and they don't care about anything else in the game anymore. Kind of just want this. And I think sometimes it's a healthy thing to just step a little bit back from the grind, so to say, to enjoy it again. To really at some point you have to step back from the grind to really enjoy what actually makes the game, what makes the game really great. And so when it comes to top tier gameplay, for me the problem is that it's all about AP FSDS. You see an enemy tank, AP FSDS shell under the gun, and either you outright kill him or you cripple him. And I think this is kind of where War Thunder stepped back in terms of the variety of gameplay options. And one problem that I see at high tier as well is, why would you even have a light tank? Okay, if your main battle tank can do the very same stuff except for scouting and helping repair, and even better, having armor, better gun, better stabilizer. So this is kind of a problem that I see in the variety of War Thunder at high tier. And the same goes for chats. It's also not really enjoyable. And whatever you reason bring to the table, I think a lot of people have a lot of chats, but a lot of people really don't play it because it's not enjoyable. Yes, you cannot please everybody, but I think you could do it much better than it currently is. And a lot of the problems I see with compression.
The main issue with top tier jets is not compression. The main issue with top tier jets is something you can never fix, and we see this in all games. So we see this in World of Tanks. We see this in any large PvP game. There is a meta, and the meta is whatever makes you win. Guess what makes you win in War Thunder? You got two vehicles, the G91 at 8.0, the Canada Air Sabre at 9.0. Both these vehicles have nearly or above 80% win rates. add their tiers. And so if you delete those, does this solve the problem? No. You just get two other vehicles which do exactly the same thing. Because what people want to do is they want to win. And what they'll do to win is play the best vehicles. When it comes to the light tank argument, that can be made for any light tank in the game. That's not just an issue for rank 6. That is an issue for light tanks in general, which is why I like the fact that we've been given the scouting mechanic. There's a reason to now play scout tanks over their medium tank counterparts, thanks to mechanics. And as I said with the ship stuff before, I hope we get more mechanics for different types of vehicles so they actually have a place in the game.
I would also just add to that regarding the light tanks and also some of the jets, for example. You could say, you know, what is the reason for playing this? What is the reason for even implementing this? But bear in mind, no matter what vehicle it is in the game, I guarantee you there has been a group of people or, you know, a person somewhere along the line that has requested that vehicle because it means something to them. It's something significant to them. And it doesn't matter whether it's, you know, ahead of its time, behind its time. It could be worse than its competitors or better than its competitors. There will be people that enjoy playing that tank. And that comes back to that discussion we had about the group of, you know, people who enjoy a particular niche in the game. If they have a vehicle that means something to them or they have a connection with a certain group of vehicles and they enjoy them, then why not allow them to just play those vehicles? It may not be meta relevant, as we've said. It may not be the most competitive vehicle, but people play them because they enjoy them, and they get satisfaction out of owning the aircraft, customizing it, researching it, playing it with their friends, and just seeing, you know, can I use this vehicle? And they see it as a personal challenge sometimes to compete with a certain vehicle. And again, I think that's one of the other significant things about our game, because it has so many diverse vehicles. There are good ones, there are bad ones, but that is kind of a subjective matter in some ways. Obviously, the meta-relevant ones, that's not so subjective in opinion, but and as you already said as well, some of the mechanics for light vehicles make them stand out a bit more than, you know, heavy tanks or main battle tanks. They have a purpose, especially with the repair mechanics now as well. There is a reason for them, and that's on multiple levels, not just a gameplay relevant level.
Yeah, the scouting mechanic was one of the best additions to ground forces over the last few years, because it opened up, you know, a play style, which is something which is kind of hard to do in a game which has a pretty set meta, and it reinvigorated, you know, a whole class of vehicles, which is great. On the topic of, you know, certain people really enjoying certain vehicles, have you guys heard of I don't know, I can't remember his name, and it's one of two vehicles, but all he does is he either only plays the A20 or he only plays the JU88, and if you look at his like card, that's all he's played whenever he's
I've
played
seen him.
Warzone.
Yeah, he has a ridiculous amount of ground while it gets destroyed on the Junkers 88.
Yeah.
But that's part of the thing I love. You come across these people and they may find a vehicle in the game and just think to themselves, you know what, I'm not interested in the other 100 whatever nations there are. I'm solely interested in this vehicle. This is where I get my enjoyment from, and this is where I will remain. And that's perfectly fine. I genuinely believe that if someone finds enjoyment out of the vehicle, be that a group or a singular one, you know, they enjoy the game, they're enjoying what they do, and I think that's a good thing.
That's wonderful. That's what games are about, right? Having fun.
Yeah. We're trying to have fun.
One of my personal favorites, just on a side note, ever since I first joined, one of my suggestions was the KI-94-2. It's not a particularly powerful aircraft. It's not a meta-relevant piston engine fighter, really. It's beaten out by a lot of other super props and a lot of other choices Japan has. I just think it's a spectacularly amazing looking aircraft. I enjoy taking it out for a flight, and I get enjoyment just flying it. You know, and I'm sure there's other people out there too who have their own favorites like that.
I'll tell you one thing, I would kill to own the Q94 too, because I missed out on the event when it was available because I was away out fishing. I was so gutted, and I was like, damn, I really wanted to own this, but
I like it because it complements the N1Ks and the Ki-84s. Like, it's definitely, if you want to take like a meta vehicle, yeah, you don't take it. But like playstyle wise, it's really good at supporting those fighters. Like, absolutely great. And I think a lot of people overlook.
Actually, this is a good question. What's your favorite vehicle in War Thunder, or favorite vehicles? Doesn't necessarily need to be one.
Bloody hell.
Sea Fury. Just a personal favorite in real life, and I love it in game too. Again, it's not a meta-relevant vehicle. It's not something that's gonna, you know, hands down beat everything it faces. I just really enjoy flying it. It's got a very good playstyle in my opinion, and I just have a lot of personal interest in the aircraft.
For me, it's definitely the Sky Raiders. They are such powerful planes, and you know, to abuse them in a certain way to hunt enemy fighters is the sweetest thing that there is. And you can certainly do it if you kind of train it a little bit. It's really cool seeing the enemy team being confused, being attacked by a ground attacker, and ever since I had this one match, I love the plane. And I have to say, also, it's better for grinding to hunt enemy fighters because the reward for even, you know, destroying multiple dozens of ground units, it's just simply not rewarding, sadly.
Mine is the Tempest Mark V, and it's mainly because of historical reasons. So I really like the plane in history, but on top of it, it was the first rank 4 fighter that I got in the game, and it was the first time I felt like I could deal with the B-17s and the P-51s on Hokkaido in air realistic. Because back in the day, if you guys went around, or, you know, I mean, I know we were, but maybe in the chat or something, there was no limit on bombers in air realistic, and the Hokkaido map was like 9 out of 10 of your games rank 4 Britain. You know, you didn't have the naval aircraft line, you didn't have the Griffin Spitz, so you pretty much had a Tempest Mark V and you had the Tempest Mark II. And the issue with the Mark II is that it always used to get up-tiered into jets, but the Mark V sat at a place where it could actually climb, it had good Hispanos, it was able to wreck B-17s, and it was the first time I actually felt in control of a machine and I could use it to take over a battle. And from there, you know, I was able to gain confidence, I was able to become a pretty decent pilot, and yeah, it was kind of a turning point for me when it actually comes to War Thunder of working out from how do I actually fly aircraft to, okay, I know what I'm doing now.
I think my favorite aircraft in the game would have to be, at the moment, because I swap a lot, because it's, you know, it's like flavor of the month. It'll be one thing, and then next thing, the next. But I think my favorite aircraft has to go to the Japanese Zero. In particular, the A6M5 Co. It's just so pleasant to fly. It just glides.
One of those planes, yeah.
Just, you know, it doesn't have a horrible speed. It glides into the turns. Just,
I remember the old joke in War Thunder was, I can't believe Japan lost the war with all these aircraft. And then you realize that they only made 1 or 2 of each. And you're like,
yeah.
That'd be why.
Yeah. Maybe go back to the topic of ships.
Yeah, I was just gonna mention the ships.
Because one of the things that I just I played a few cruiser games today, I guess, or yesterday, and one of the things that I kind of missed was the feedback, and it's, you know, the 5 and 6 gun, 6-inch guns. They kind of sometimes do not really give you the feedback that you need. Like when in a patrol boat versus patrol boat fight, it's mostly to blacken the sections, right? And therefore you kill the crew and then kill eventually the ship, or you get a lucky detonation on the Amarak. And for especially the cruiser fight, the problem is that the sections are the same, like the or, you know, the principle is the same. Like you have those vertical cuts through the ship, but some of the armor layouts is, or the majority of armor layout is horizontally. So very often you shoot like a HE shell, a big HE shell, into the superstructure, and you see no damage whatsoever. So that's kind of something that I would love to have explained, or change in such a section that you have multiple sections on top of each other, like at least 2, you know, to make the difference between the armored part and the unarmored part, so that you kind of get a bit more feedback. What kind of damage do I actually do to the enemy cruiser in particular, because this is where armor gets into the game for higher tier ships. And the same goes up sometimes for destroyers. Sometimes, well, recently there was also the change between the armor piercing effect on various different ships. Like with the end of the pre-close beta, that got changed, and I found actually no significant mention of it. Maybe I've overlooked it, but that kind of changed the gameplay massively. And actually, I have to say, in the majority of cases, for the better. But one aspect that I really don't like about patrol boats versus destroyers is from the destroyer's perspective. Like, a patrol boat goes bow in, and you only have HE shells, okay? And the rear section is undamaged, and you can't just kill the guy. And then he just rushes towards you and torpedoes you. So from a mechanical standpoint. And so some of the game mechanics, some of the technical adjustments, or you know, the rules, I think they are not kind of explained to me. I mean, the majority of stuff that I know comes from either tanks, because the mechanics are somewhat similar, mentioning Hellbreak here, but some of the stuff I just don't get. And sometimes I get a crew knockout by hitting only the bridge, and at least to the hit camera. And so this is sometimes a bit strange, and I'd love to get a bit more reliable information on it.
I'm sure as Naval gets more fleshed out, you'll probably get more information on it. I think it may be worth trying to study the armor layouts of every light cruiser, because then you could work out where to shoot and not really run into that issue. There's also the problem with compartments on ships, where certain ships have modifications, which I don't know what it is, but there's a modification on the Isle class, I believe it is, which it puts more strength between compartments, so it's very hard to break through if a shell hits one compartment into the other. And I'm guessing the light cruisers have something like that as well, and that might be preventing a lot of the damage depending on where you hit on the ship.
Yeah, but you don't get any feedback where you could, you know, then base it on. Like, you know, I know, okay, this ship has an belt here, then there is an armored deck there, and then there is no armor anywhere, maybe a little bit of 8mm plating around the turrets. For instance, the KMS Emden. And then I would expect that if I hit, you know, the section above the armored belt with multiple shells, it just, you know, okay, I get a registration, I hit there, but I did no damage. Like with a 6-inch high explosive shell. And I don't see the number for the crew dropping. And I also then that the kind of it's a bit strange, you know, and that makes the cruiser versus cruiser fight strange. And adding to this, the Kalashnikovs with the 7-inch shells, they're roughly 7-inch. I kind of don't feel that the shells are really that more powerful, whereas they should be. So I think for the light cruisers, it's most likely just spamming 6-inch high explosive shells at each other up until your point blank range, like for cruisers, you know, 3 kilometers, perfectly broadside on. Then you can work with the AP.
So
I think.
Go ahead.
Sorry. No, sorry. It's fine.
There's a phrase, and it's always attributed to Einstein, but I don't know if he said it. But I do know a character who did say it, and he's called Vass, and he's out of Far Cry 3. If you keep doing the same thing over and over again, and expecting different results, that is the definition of insanity. So try something else, and then maybe it'll help.
Believe me, I tried. That's the thing. I tried everything, of course. I tried armor piercing. I tried explosive.
No, I mean shooting it in different places.
Yeah, guess what I try.
Well,
like, okay, here's the thing.
You put it all in the same place.
It was just an example, and it speaks for many examples. I give you another one that I actually kind of think of myself as I do understand the mechanics. What in the pre-close beta worked reliable, what these days I didn't have the fortune to do again, since I have the class in Kafkas again, is to shoot high explosive, hit the belt, smash through the belt, and get the ship to float. Then it lists to one side. And if the enemy doesn't angle quickly enough, I load the AP and go through the turtle pack armor design then with the AP. And this is how you can gun down a KMS Emden with the right mixture of high explosive and armor piercing. What really confuses me is that I get literally little to no feedback whatsoever what kind of damage to the superstructure I do. And when I mean superstructure, I don't mean like the bridge and such as I mean all the parts of the ship that are not armored, okay? Like with a high explosive shell, I should do damage. I should kill crew inside of this section, but I don't do it. And this is what confuses me, and I don't know why.
I think the thing to remember here, especially with light cruisers, is these things have the most complicated, not only 3D visual model, but also the most insane damage model we've ever had in the game. You can times probably the biggest tank we have by at least about 10 or 20, considering the amount of compartments, crew, armor, modules inside. There is a whole bunch going on there, and it's not always the same for all four. For example, the British one differs quite differently to the Krasny, for example, the German again from the American. You know, the other thing to remember is during closed beta, a lot of tweaks were made, big and small, to do with the damage model, and even just going into release with 1.83, there were, again, significant changes. And the damage feedback system, I guess, is very similar to the ground forces one. And it made sense for the ground forces one, you know, with the hit camera, the damage model, that kind of stuff. Players got used to it. It's very sort of, I guess, you know, to some degree in a tank, they have similar ammo locations. There's certain things after a while of playing you get to understand. And as you said, playing ships in the closed beta, you got to understand how the mechanics work there. And generally, most of the mechanics work the same now. And I'm not saying you don't have an understanding of the mechanics, not at all. But what I mean by that is, cruisers, there's only one per nation, and as I said, they are insanely complex. And it may well be that they require, you know, a slightly different hit camera, a slightly different UI interface. It might not be a case of you're doing something wrong necessarily. It could just simply be a case of this is still a very new class of vehicle, but it's actually the most sophisticated and complicated the game's ever seen. Therefore, there may be tweaks, there may be reworks. It also could be a case of after time, there'll be more, I guess, feedback from the players. There'll be more videos, tutorials, articles, more knowledge shared of it as well, because that is part of the learning curve with naval. There is a huge difference between the damage mechanics of a PT boat, as you know, to these cruisers. These cruisers are insane. I mean, just literally sitting in the hangar, you can see there is so much internally, not even just the external model. The internals of these ships are insane.
Yeah.
So it is a bit difficult at the moment. I understand what you're saying. Definitely, I don't disagree with it. And it's not a case of you don't know what you're doing. Obviously, it's a case of each one of these ships, you know, just by nature of how they were in real life, are insanely different to each other. They may all be cruisers, but they are different. Ship design, ship internals, all that kind of stuff is different. And the complications of modeling that in a game are very high. Most of the issues of the damage model being ironed out now. There may still be some, but it's also a case of, you know, if you feel like there isn't enough feedback from the game towards you, that's something, you know, your opinion and everyone else's opinion counts in that effect. It's something we can all work towards getting these things right. Particularly, as I said, as these are relatively new in terms of implementation to the game.
The two things I want to draw on is the first one, comparing CBT experience to OBT experience is a non-starter. The reason for this is if you've been following the change logs and the update logs, they have significantly changed the way a lot of the ballistics work for a lot of the ammunition on ships. So drawing from CBT experiences won't help in this regard. The other thing is when it comes to ships, I remember when tanks came into OBT. Do you remember how they used to show what damage you did to tanks?
Pardon again?
When tanks came into OBT, do you remember how you found out what you did to a tank? You know, when you hit it. Do you remember the old system?
Yeah, I think that was before.
Yeah, it was just a list of modules that you damaged.
Yeah, it was a list of modules on the side of the screen, which were either red, black, yellow, or orange. And it was abysmal, because it didn't really give you any proper feedback. And when I look at naval forces, the system that shows you what damage you're doing. Yes, sometimes it could be a bit clear on why you're not doing damage, but it is miles ahead of what we had at the start of tank OBT, and I think also it's very similar to what we have in tanks right now. So I think the system overall is good. I think light cruisers may have been a step too far, especially with, you know, what Smin said about modeling and everything. It's a hell of a lot of work just for one vehicle. And it's also another reason why stuff like battleships, for me, is not really a reasonable idea when it comes to just the modeling and all of this stuff. The larger the model, the more issues you're going to have with it, and it's going to annoy more people because there's going to be more bugs and so on and so forth. So, yeah.
I think I can agree with you, like, with battleships in particular. Because even light cruisers right now are probably the most sophisticated kind of, you know, damage model in-game we have. There's just so much in there. And battleships are going to have far, far more packed into them. They're going to be so much bigger, and in turn, you know, that's more for the game to try and handle. And I know that there is that kind of leniency towards, you know, ultra low quality and people on low end PCs being able to play, because I know there is quite a big group of players that play on, you know, potatoes or toasters, whatever you want to ask. Yeah. And there's a really big market there. But I think with the more detailed you get, say, or not detailed, but with the more complex the models get, it's more for the game to try and load in. Therefore, it puts more strain on your computer, which also leads into those potato PCs running worse during.
Yeah, and the next thing is, like, how should the gameplay be? And I think let's say, quote unquote, only perfect conditions, that just two battleships engage each other at the same time at reasonable range for battleships, whatever that means. Let's say 15 kilometers, 10 to 15 kilometers. And just even if you get in the hits, you know, a battleship is so massive, it's so big, it can soak up so much damage. And if you say, yeah, but look at Bismarck versus Hood, well, simulations have shown that it must have been an absolute freak shot, because, you know, it's designed to not blow up. And in this respect, yeah, you then have those big, beautiful models of the ships, but the gameplay is not really nice. And I think from what I played so far, destroyers and to a certain degree light cruisers are right at the edge of what's being fun. Yes, it get tweaked, it get improved and changed and so forth, but can you imagine trying to gun down a heavy cruiser from the size? If you don't hit the ammo rack, it takes a while.
Yeah,
it takes a while.
It's like when you're in a PT boat and you have to fight a destroyer, something we already have in game. It's absolutely abhorrent and should never happen.
Depends on the PT boat.
I completely disagree. Name me a PT boat that goes well against a destroyer.
I think
LCS.
I reckon
that's not a PT boat.
I reckon there's a way you could make the hydrofoils work against a destroyer, but they're not necessarily something that can go on par or even remotely equal to a destroyer. Like, maybe if you catch an unaware destroyer who has their AA set to only shooting planes, you can probably catch them off guard, because the hydrofoils are extremely quick. You get in there, dump your torps, and then try and get out quickly. But the thing is, for most players that have actually got a destroyer, is they can just, you know, use the lock-on feature, and just, they're immediately going to know where you are, and it only takes one well-placed, high-explosive main armament round to just blow the thing to pieces.
Yeah.
Whereas you
like yeah. Continue.
Yeah, like as opposed to the PT boat that has to hit maybe one or two torpedoes. Like the main armament on a PT boat is going to do absolutely nothing to a destroyer apart from just tickle it.
I think there has to be either a fundamental shift on how we see different values of ships, or shifting in the game mode itself, or, you know, as I talked about, wars and stuff. So when you're in a ship, let's say you're in like a 3.3, you're in some kind of PT boat, you got some torpedoes, trading 1-for-1 with a 4.3 destroyer is amazing. right? That should be seen as an amazing feat, but people don't see it as an amazing feat, and you're not also given the amount of reward that should be the amazing feat. Like, technically, if your 3.3 on your team trades with a 4.3, then that gives your team a massive advantage, even though that player is knocked out of the game, because they've been able to take out technically a better vehicle than their own. So either we add in some kind of compensation for, if you take out a higher tier vehicle or something weird like that, or the general mentality of the player has to change, which I think it can happen, especially in ships, since it did happen in ground forces with the light tanks. I think a lot of people now see the value in light tanks, even though they're not as combat effective as some of the tanks at that tier.
I think one change, personally, I'd like to see the naval forces is basically keeping destroyers completely out of the PT boat zone. So you shouldn't have a destroyer running through there. It does make it quite easy to torp destroyers there, but any capable destroyer player is just going to load their AA to shoot at boats, and you're never going to get even remotely close to it.
Yeah.
Just ends up. But
Yeah, because it's if I may overtake.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, the problem that kind of throws many people off from the gameplay, I don't know if that's the right word, but what turns them off, so to say, is you're in your PT boat, you try your best, and before you can win the battle for the PT boat area, it's getting decided outside which destroyers get into the PT boat area first and harvest them. And there are destroyers that are not that strong, but the majority of destroyers that you see are the 4.3 premiums, and they are more than capable of, taking on multiple PT boats as one. And I think the good solution, or an easy solution that I mentioned before, was to make the PT boat area a bit bigger so that there are more tactical opportunities. But foremost, you need to make an area where there is shallow water, where destroyers cannot go through, or you mine the damn thing. So destroyers need to take much longer to go in there, if they go in there at all. And so this is now what I think is very important. Furthermore, if we want to make in the future mines viable, then the patrol boats need to get to the other place. And currently, how it plays out on the majority of maps, they are easy to spot and easy to gun down, and the mines are not long enough. I think their timer is 3 minutes, and then they blow up themselves. And so they would be very, very situational. So this is kind of a problem for an amazing idea, I think, mines, to make it actually viable in the game. So to keep destroyers out of the PT boat area is, in my personal opinion, a must-do.
I think in terms of the map design in doing that, I think it's more than possible. As you guys would probably know, that some of the maps in ground forces are considerably different to when they first were implemented. Some are even unrecognizable compared to how they first started. Cuban, for example, is so different to how it was when it first entered the game, and that happens over time. After a while of players considerably playing that map, gathering data from the hotspots, what's working, what isn't working, what's causing player frustration, what can be done to make the gameplay more smooth on that map, more balanced. They're tweaked and altered all the time. The terrain's altered, the boundaries of the map are changed quite significantly, and the same can be said for naval too. I'm sure in the future we'll see if a certain part of the map is extremely problematic for PT boats because they're being just dominated by a single destroyer that manages to get through a certain area, things can and will change for sure.
I can think of one destroyer / patrol boat in particular that's kind of destroying naval forces right now.
There are multiple imbalanced things.
Yeah,
yes.
There's the 140-141, and there's also the PR-159. I'm sure everybody's been going off about those two.
The one thing also is that in the ships in OBT, we haven't even had them for a month yet.
Yeah,
just think about that.
Yeah.
And this is something that I always talk about with rank 6 stuff. There's a reason I have a lot of the rank 6 tanks, but I don't do reviews on them, and I never will. And the reason for this is because the meta will never truly be defined in them unless you play it for about a year. That's why whenever a new patch comes out, when the M1 IP comes out and everybody's going, oh, the Americans are overpowered, and then the Leopard 204 comes out, oh, the Germans are overpowered, all of this stuff. It's mind-boggling to me. But it's the same with ships right now. We haven't had OBT. We've had it less than a month, right? The meta is nowhere near defined. We don't know exactly how everything's going to play out. Yes, there may be problems, but it would be nice to see, maybe this conversation would be better off in like 3 months or so, when we know what is defined and what is not defined, and what is good and what is not good when it comes to War Thunder, ships.
It also changes drastically as well when you introduce new nations as well. Like you were saying earlier about the G91, 8.0 meta was entirely different before Italy joined the game. And now obviously it's significantly different with that aircraft, and the same thing can be said of the CL-13. Matches were so different when it was just MiG-15s versus Sabres. With the 17 being added, the Hunter being added, the meta changes significantly, even with the addition of a single vehicle at certain times.
Yeah, I mean, the G91 was the last big meta thing, if you don't include the rank 6 tanks. I think the last big meta thing for planes was definitely the G91. I'd agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing with ships. Like, even though we've probably all played a lot of it when it was in the closed beta stage, it's a completely different game. Like, because instead of having 20 eyes playing it, you have 20,000. Yeah. And that means people are going to work out different strategies quicker. They're going to work out what works best, all of that stuff, and it's going to happen at a rapid pace. That's why in games like League of Legends, where they make like balance changes, or Dota, when they make balance changes, and something can be ridiculously overpowered when it hits like the live server and they don't catch it, it's because nobody's tested that strategy, or nobody's tested this little intricate thing. So I'm hoping for ships there are some weird and wonderful strategies people can come up with to be able to deal with these destroyers. Right now, I am drawing a massive blank, though.
Yeah, I think down the line, it's definitely something to look forward to. It's when people start figuring out strategies for things, like how PT boats can effectively work with destroyer, or other bit.
Yeah.
Well, there are certainly a handful of ships that I know that are not really nice for the overall gameplay, because they have too many strength bound to them in the current meta. And when I look at the SF-40 Leichte, when I look at the Jaguar, when I look at the what's the name of it? Is it the TS boat Project 206? The same goes for some of the Russian ships.
Wait. You think the SF-40 is overpowered?
The SF-40 Leichte, yes.
Really?
I would have said so in the closed beta, but I think now it's definitely settled and found its spot quite nicely.
I mean, if let's say if that thing becomes meta, you know what happens? People get in PT boats and they go and capture the other 2 zones where you're nowhere near and can't get to because you're slow as all hell. And you only have a range of 2 kilometers. So guns such as the 40mm Bofors on like the Black Ship for the British, that outranges you. And so does,
that is true. This is why I said it's because of the meta. Because on the majority of maps where I spawn in the PT boat area, I'm always within 2 kilometers. And I played the thing today, and yes, there are ships that are capable of dealing with it, but the ships that are capable of dealing with this one are the other problematic ships. And I can assure you that it is a problem if you go into your normal, quote-unquote, normal patrol boat and you face one of these, or you face the Jaguar, or you face the Project 206, and in particular, the LCS L3. As you said, the 40mm Bofors is probably for PT boats the most diverse and most powerful weapon that there is.
Yeah, I agree with you. I completely disagree about the SF40. Like if you're having troubles killing it, just go around it. Don't even touch it. Every map is over 2 kilometers, right? You can either outrange it, you can either torpedo it. It's never going to get anywhere anytime soon, you know. So if it's in the south part of the map, just go to the bloody north. You don't have to fight the damn thing. And if you want to fight it, torpedo it because it can't bloody move.
This is where if you talk about one.
Well, no. If there's multiple, that's even better because they get stuck in 20 kilometers an hour, can hardly move. I get to capture the other 2 zones, and then whenever they get near to their second, the second zone where they're about to capture, guess what? Torpedoes everywhere. Goodbye. It is not a good vehicle. The other ones are. I completely would agree with the other ones, but that one, it can easily be outplayed.
I wouldn't say it's easy because, again, as I said, in the majority of cases, you are within 2 kilometers of range of your targets. And the ridiculous rate of fire, if you know how to aim versus PT boats, the thing does too much damage.
Right? Why are you within 2 kilometers of it if you can outrange it and you can torpedo it?
Because if you look at the majority of maps, if you come around the corner and there it is, because as I said in the beginning, the PT boat area is way too small to make for any suitable adjustments. The thing can lock down an entire area. And I played the thing, I played versus it, and it's always the same result. In the pre-close beta, now I played it today as well, before the enemy can straighten out to drop a torpedo. Because
I would definitely say it's significantly different to the closed beta. The closed beta, I would agree, it was definitely causing a problem because it was in range of even the first S-boats, the S-38B and some of those, and the equivalent to the Americans and the Russians. It was causing an absolute hellstorm because they didn't have the range. And essentially, some of them couldn't do anything about it. I agree. But then since then, it's gone up in battle rating. There's been other vessels that have snuck in from the Russians and the British too. And people, as the European Canadians already said, have developed meta ways to get around it, not just to avoid it completely, but also to take it out. Yeah. There are things on its battle rating that can quite confidently deal with it that aren't PT boats, agreed. It's a similar sort of thing to tanks. You wouldn't go charging in to an IS-7 with a M41. You would go around it and flank it or coordinate with your team. And obviously it's difficult to coordinate with your team in an online game. But there are tactics and strategies you develop, and that's part of a learning curve. That's part of the naval method that will be. Bear in mind, most of us that have been here through the closed beta have already learned the hard way how to deal with that thing. A lot of the slaughter you're probably seeing is some of the players who haven't played the CBT and have just come into OBT. They've been playing naval for maybe 1 or 2 days at the most, and they're dealing with this thing for the first time ever. So obviously it can wipe the floor with certain people that don't know how to deal with it because they're just, as you say, coming around a corner. They're not checking their maps. They're not coordinating with team members. They're not in a squad. Maybe they're not used to looking out for these things. It's the same thing with a tank. You can see straight away the newer players because they'll just burn around a corner without scouting, without checking, without any consideration of, okay, am I going for a choke point? Am I going out to a zone that is eyes on from the enemy spawn? It's all of these things that you pick up by playing as well.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
If you're having issues with SF40s, and the majority of the maps, they normally spawn near the closest cap point, which is generally, you can tell which one it is. So just spawn at the other cap point and go for the other 2 points. They can't do anything. They're sat there, and if you really want to, jiggle with fire, just torpedo them. Like, I personally mainly play arcade, so you have rechargeable torpedoes, and I think that is much more fun than realistic. So just do that, and you won't have any problems with the SF40s. The other ones, you will.
I think we can agree that we don't have the same opinion.
Well, no, the difference we have in opinion is that I have worked out a way to go around it. And I don't think a lot of players have yet, because they either haven't had the experience in the game or they haven't thought about it. What they've tried to do is they've tried to fight mano-y-mano with the SF-40. And you can't do that, because it will annihilate you every time. So you have to go around. As somebody who is majorly a light tank player and a heavy tank player when it comes to the game, I have pretty much, like, the strategies I use in ground forces are not what the general player would use, because I try and exploit different things in different areas, and that's all I've done in ships, and it's pretty simple. Like, it's stay out of range of its guns, outrange it, because the majority of ships can torpedo it, because it can't move. Like, it's pretty simple, right?
I'd just say
that's well said in theory. That's the thing.
And practice, because I do it every day.
Yeah, I don't know how arcade works out, and I know this comes from me that previously played a lot of arcade, but I only play realistic. I don't know if the maps are differently designed and how differently the game mechanics work. I'm talking here about realistic, and it just does too much damage too quickly.
Stay away from it. Simple as. When you acquire a target, it gives you distance measured. Right? Stay out of that 2K range. Done.
Yeah. And I use the 37 to gun those peasants down that are outside of this range.
Yeah, good for them. You'll do absolutely no damage because they're too fast. And they have more guns than your 137.
Just to add what you guys have said as well, and also being picked up in chat, people are saying so the solution is just to avoid it. I wouldn't say it's just to avoid it, but it's like every other aspect in the game. If you see Dornier 335 in realistic battles and you're flying your P-51 Mustang or your Spitfire, would you necessarily directly go head-on with that vehicle? Because in every situation, I would say absolutely no. You would get around it, you would maneuver, you would avoid it, and then catch it in a turn, find another way to engage it, but under all circumstances, you never go directly head-on, literally giving him every opportunity to use all of his advantages against you. That's just how that vehicle was designed. Frontally, that thing will kill you every single time, unless he just can't aim. The SF-40, as the European Canadian has said, in most cases, you scoot around it, you get away from it, you pull yourself away from it, drop torps, and then go around. Use the terrain, use smoke, use whatever you have to do, go around it, flank it, and kill it from the sides, kill it while it's distracted. If there's multiple of them locking down a point, there is multiple other ways you can engage it. You can use aircraft, you can use other vehicles too, but the game, no aspect of the game, be that air, ground, or sea, has ever been, I should be able to take my vehicle head-on against another vehicle I face, and I should be able to frontally kill it. If that was the case, what would be the point of heavy tanks? What would be the point of any aircraft with heavy cannon armament that is boom and zoom and not, a maneuver dogfighter? What would be the point of any developing strategy? It just doesn't make sense. So I understand what you guys are saying in chat, but no, the solution is not just to simply avoid it. Yes, you can avoid it and you can just go and capture zones. But as the European Canadians also said, there are other ways of killing the thing. You don't have to just run away from it. You can actively fight it. It's not, this god that can't be killed.
Yeah, the problem that Napalm had is that he is going around a corner at the start of the battle and it's absolutely annihilating him. My advice is
that's not what I said.
Well, go ahead then.
What I said is that I can position myself with this thing with ease and just mow down enemy patrol boats.
I agree, I can too.
Yeah, okay.
And I can inflict so much damage. Like there are just a handful of other ships that can do it as well. Right. And those other ships can take it on, yes. But those ships do not give a benefit. Let me speak. But those other ships are also not very good for the gameplay. And in my opinion, it's just a problem that you leave free hand to a handful of vehicles that make so many other vehicles obviously uninteresting, unimportant, completely obsolete, whereas there is nothing wrong with those ships themselves. And that is my problem. And I think the SF-40 can be quite a bit of a quick, cheap giggle, to play. But in the long run, in my opinion, for the gameplay, it does just more harm than any good. And so I would up-tier it, because it's still very, very good at anti-aircraft purposes. And late game, you see so many aircraft flying around. But to make this the kind of aerial denial bully, the complete aerial denial bully, is what I dislike about this. There are ships that are even better at this, like the LCS and the Project 206 and you name it, but they're also not really fun to play against. And that's the issue. And there are people that are, I don't know the percentage, there are some people that don't really care because they're playing day and night with their premium destroyers and most of the time just going directly for the patrol boats. And then you have the people that try to grind normally, and then all they see is the spam of those, vehicles that are very, very good and very difficult to take down. And when you say, okay, outrange them, how?
Right.
Do
Okay.
you want to outrange the SF40 in a vehicle that also just has a 20mm gun?
Okay.
And
name me
so
the vehicle.
Just remember,
Name me the
guys,
vehicle.
kind of stay away from that kind of raw interior, because this is not a place, we're not here to talk about, things that are wrong or things like that. Suggesting nice improvements or, stuff like that's nice. But,
It's a simple solution with the SF40. If your experience, Napalm, is that you are in the SF40, sat on a corner, gunning people down, you know what could solve this for those people? Don't go around the bloody corner. Go around the other corner. That's it. Go around.
That's the thing.
And
there
if
is
they don't
just this
do
one
that,
corner around to the cap.
No.
That's the thing.
Don't go to the other cap. There are 3 caps, right? And at least one of them has open water on it. And when it comes to positioning, something that, Smin said, and something I will clarify, just because you avoid something at the start of a game doesn't mean you don't deal with it later. You avoided it at the start to get into a better position to then deal with it at an advantage. And that is what I'm advocating for. Not forget about it and, deal with everything else. But what you do is you set yourself up in a position where you have the advantage. It's something you do all the time in vehicles like the T92. The T92 is a fast vehicle when fully upgraded, doesn't have the best ammo, has a great auto-loader. The problem with it, though, is that it cannot take on heavy tanks head-to-head. So you know what I don't do? I don't charge into the face of a Tiger 2H, right? I sit on the flank, I wait. And I wait for it to either move, I scout it, make sure my team knows where it is, and I play like that. That's exactly what you do against an SF40. You wait, you patience, and you have patience. And this is a problem that War Thunder has in general. People don't like playing defensive, people don't like having patience. And that is not a game issue, that is a player issue.
I would also just say on the subject of BR, since people are mentioning it too in chat, as we've already said again, Naval's been an open beta test for just over a week or so now. There is a period of time after every update where we look at things and see what's doing what's being, what has crazy percentages and things like that. And if it's a clear case of this thing is dominating at its BR, then BRs can be adjusted. That's the whole point of the BR system. But we're nowhere near at the stage right now where this thing is absolutely ruining battles for every single player. It's a case of, again, I agree. In the hands of a good player right now at this moment in time, an SF40 can lock down a corner. But that's because we have had the experience of playing against this thing. We know the maps, we know how this thing works, and there are new players who have only just been playing Naval for a matter of hours who aren't expecting they have to play defensively, they have to look out for what is equivalently a heavy tank on the water. They're not expecting something to have that amount of firepower. They haven't come up against that class, for example, because it's not every nation has an example of that class per se. They have variants of landing crafts or landing support ships or submarine chasers, but not everyone has a flak barge. It is part of the learning experience. It is not something that you can just go charging headfirst into. And again, on your comment of the map only has one corner, there's other capture zones, but as I said earlier on, the maps can and will be adjusted, the same as the ground forces maps have been. If there's been a choke point that is absolutely devastating to gameplay, the map simply gets adjusted. It happens every update.
There's also the issue with now, since OBT hasn't been going for long, a lot of people will be at the lower tiers. So when you use ships which are around 2.7s, 3.0s, you'll probably get down tiered a lot into 2.0, 2.3s, 1.7s, and as time goes on, those will become much more 25% across the board. So when the SF40 is up tiered, it gets annihilated. Like all the experiences I've seen with it, where it plays above its BR, the only thing it can do is shoot down planes. And there are other ships which I can also shoot down planes with, which have useful guns on them. So right now, I think we're in a period where the SF-40 is getting down-tiered a lot, going against a lot of new players and also a lot of lower-tier vehicles, whereas in the future, in the coming months, it will be much more, you know, up and down when it comes to its matchmaking.
Well, we will see. That is your opinion. Mine is different. I think we can agree on that.
I think everyone's gonna have a different. It's just, and to be honest, you know, if we all had the same opinion, then it'd be boring.
Part of the fun of the game.
Well, let's do an example, right? So somebody said in the chat, SF-40 equals jumbo. If I have a team of jumbos, I can take over a match, right? I can take it over. If I have a team of SF-40s, I can't. And the reason is because they're too slow. So you can maybe capture 1 point, you can maybe control 1 point or 1.5 points, but you will never be able to take the 2 points in order to win. And that is the difference between the two. A jumbo is a heavy tank with a decent, well, not a decent gun, but an above average gun for its tier. It's got good speed behind it. It can take stuff over. The SF-40 can't, right? It's too slow.
I think, on the note of that topic and everything, I think it's a good time to end it. It's been around the 3-hour mark. It was about an hour over what I wanted to do. You know, sometimes you get carried away and discussion takes over and you just lose yourself, and then, you know. So it's a fun topic to get on. But, I'm gonna end it here because I'm a busy person myself. I've got things to go and do. I'm sure you guys probably have things to do, or might want to go to sleep, or whatever.
Sleep? What's this foreign
Never
concept?
heard of that sleep concept. That just doesn't make sense to me.
Is it 3 hours already?
Yeah, it's been just about a whole 3 hours since I started the stream, and
Doesn't feel like it.
Holy hell. Okay.
that's kind of what happens when you're at a podcast. You get really carried away, and you're like, oh shit, it's been 3 hours already. But yeah. Again, I'd like to thank you guys for coming on. I know
Thank you for having us.
near the end of it there, we kind of got a bit ranty, and, you know, we started going on opinions, but that's fine. That's kind of the whole idea of a podcast, is, you know, you get to talk about your opinion, and or fact, whatever way you want to put it and whatnot, and it's always a blast to just throw a bunch of people on a podcast and see where it goes from there. I just hope the stream chat doesn't get too bored with my boring ass gameplay in the background of me getting murdered in naval force.
I always enjoy the Mi-24 that you're playing right now. I love that helicopter so much.
I've just been learning how to fly the damn thing. I always come into the test flight and just see what I can do with it. I really need to get cracking with the helicopter grind, I think.
Yeah, I just wanna. Thank you for having me, Collusion. I've enjoyed this. It'd be nice to do it again.
Oh yeah,
I
see,
agree.
this is the thing.
Fun.
Like, and I say this to everybody that comes on and hangs out in the podcast is, you know, if you enjoyed yourself, you're completely welcome to come back and sit through another one. Like, I try to give it a week's break so that way you're not doing repetitive podcasts. Like, I had a lead-in for a repetitive one of the forum moderators, and he was getting very sleepy by the end of it. But you know, it's, you know, you come on, you talk, you can have an argument with someone about something, and, you know, it comes down to opinions. As long as you don't get too heated. Like, I'm there to stop you from going too far with an argument. And, you know, I don't want to
I think difference in opinion and passion in a game is a good sign. It means everyone cares to such a degree that, you know, we all believe in our tactics, we all believe in our ways, and we were able to discuss it. I think that's a good thing. Yeah, that's always a good thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, you know.
Well, it was really enjoyable. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And in the future, I'm up for it again. So thank you very much for having me as well.
Hey, no problem. Oh, really? Wow, I have the worst mic of them all. I mean, probably, you know, I'm running a old Turtle Beach that's half a headset, and it doesn't have its little fluffy thing on the end of it, so...
TEC has the best mic? Nah, that's just my booming voice. I could be using a cup on a string and you'd still...
you gotta keep in mind, I'm jobless and I'm not a YouTuber, so I can't afford to splurge a wee bit on a decent headset. This is my old Xbox 360 headset.
Why don't you upload these podcasts to YouTube?
I do.
Oh, good shit.
Yeah, they're up on YouTube. I usually when a podcast ends, this is kind of like a behind the scenes thing in a way. I go through everyone, you know. I'll PM you and I'll basically say, plug your shit, and you know, send me all the links you want to see in the description, whether it be YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, MySpace, Tinder.
Sadly, I don't know anything to send you because we're already playing the game that I'm supposed to plug. So my promotion's done already.
Wait, so that's the thing. Like your forum profile, for example, could be something you could send me.
Oh, I don't think you want to go there. That's fine.
I don't know. I mean, I stalked Elite's page, and he called me out for stalking it.
I'm just waiting until somebody comes on and it's like, hey, do you want my Grinder account?
Yeah, I'm not looking forward to the day that happens, but if a day does happen, I'll be damn amazed. But yeah, I just want to thank the guys in the chat for coming to hang out for what was probably one of the more enjoyable discussions. Although I didn't say much, but you know, I'm still getting used. I feel like there's a subconscious in there that's like, I know my mic quality's not good. I don't really have, or in my opinion, I don't have like a voice for YouTube. In a sense.
Oh, and it could be worse. I mean, listen to me. As I said in the beginning, I hate my own.
Oh yeah, but you know that...
I have to listen. I have to listen to it every single day. It's so annoying.
I feel like you know, it's you know, I get through it. I like to think that this podcast thing's gonna let me just start talking more, and it gets to the point where people don't want to listen to me talk because I talk too much. But you know, it's always fun to try something new, and that's what the podcasts are for. And
no, you're doing a great job, bud. I really hope this thing, you know, goes somewhere, because you know, you've got a sound mind. You've had some great guests, so it's really nice.
This is the perfect time to bring this up, actually, and I'm not sure. I mean, you know, I could always try and get into Smin's DMs and see if I can get this thing going, but I've been talking to Thul, who basically, he's one of the guys that runs the Thunder
social media and stuff.
Yeah. Thunder social media. And the big thing to get this podcast up and to try and get that Gaijin support for it is the community's will to see this as a, you know, like a weekly thing. So it's more of me trying to get this as popular as I can and getting loads of community support, getting loads of questions, and, you know, because I could manage this entire thing by myself. I just need, you know, the support of the community behind it to really push it up there and get it in. But, you know, hopefully, you know, with me kind of rotating between casts, like, for example, I could have Smin in with Keith and Miles, or I could have European Canadian in with Slickby and, I don't know, another one of the seniors.
Well, in the infamous film in 1989 of Kevin Costner, the movie Field of Dreams, as the quote goes, "If you build it, they will come." So build it.
Yeah, you know,
we've all had to do it.
Yeah,
you can do it too.
It's definitely something I'm gonna work towards. I just need to get used. I just need to get to making thumbnails and then sitting through the 8-hour rendering and uploading process of this. Because, you know,
yeah,
a 3-hour-long video. I mean, it takes me long enough to upload a 20-minute video. A 3-hour-long one's just nuts. But I'm gonna upload it anyway. I don't tend to edit them. I leave them uncut, so you can sit there and do homework and watch it, or, you know, you can just do something else and listen to the podcast.
Wait, don't you just export it from Twitch?
Yeah, pretty much. I export it from Twitch, but sometimes I'll cut out the intro, because, like, with the first one, it was kind of just, I started the stream, and then I started doing, you know, I was tinkering with stuff, getting stuff to work, and, you know, I had other people in, and then I kind of just had to cut that out and go from there.
Right.
But yeah. On that note, I'm going to end the stream, so, thanks for coming out, guys.
Thank you.
Anytime,
Thank you very much.
I'm just looking for someone to host, because I feel like, you know, we should drop you on someone entertaining. Does anybody have any recommendations?
What, in War Thunder or just in general?
And War Thunder. Seeing if there's anyone I can drop a host on.
Oh, Dita is currently online.
Data's?
Or Soaring Thunder. Yes.
Yeah, let's go. Let's go with that. I'll send you all over to Data.